Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Live from Los Angeles, we will be covering today the Nicolás Maduro arraignment, the man who ruled Venezuela through chaos, sanctions, and finally U.S. airstrikes, is set to face a judge in New York City today. What I'm going to show you now, there is an emergency UN Security Council meeting. This is something else. We're going to get with this for a moment. Then we're going to show you the transport of Maduro to the court. Let's listen to a little bit of this.
Channels and develop mechanisms to avoid continued flagrant violations.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Come in, like and subscribe.
Require the help of the United Nations and of regional organizations. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Colombia for her statement and now give the floor.
The president of Somalia is the UN Emergency Council president? What?
To the representative of Russian Federation.
I'm sorry, the UN's a clown show.
Mr. President,
Sorry, I'm
first
not.
and foremost, we wish to congratulate you on your accession to the presidency.
We're just a scooch behind it, but you get the idea. I wanted you to see this.
Welcome the newly elected
Morning, guys.
members of the Security Council. The beginning of this new year shocked all of those throughout the world who cherished the hope that respect for international law and non-intervention in domestic affairs of other states, as well as a reliance upon diplomacy and seeking of compromise, became key principles in the work of the new U.S. administration. The assault against the leader of Venezuela, compounded by the deaths of dozens of Venezuelan and Cuban citizens,
Grab
in
your
the eyes
coffee.
of many, has become a harbinger of a turn back to the era of lawlessness and U.S. domination by force, chaos, and lawlessness, which continues to afflict dozens of states in various regions of the world. There is no and can be no justification for the crimes cynically perpetrated by the United States in Caracas. We firmly condemn the U.S. act of armed aggression against Venezuela in breach of all international legal norms. In connection with the confirmed reports about the presence of the abducted president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, and his spouse in the United States.
It's not abducted, it's arrested.
Today, as we are aware, they're in New York. We call upon, corrects the Speaker, the U.S. leadership to immediately release the legitimately elected president,
UN representative for the Russian Federation,
and his spouse. Any problems existing or conflict between the United States and Venezuela need to be resolved through dialogue. And this is precisely what is enshrined in the UN Charter, the purposes and the principles of which a number of states in recent years have begun to apply selectively, depending upon the political landscape. Today, we are reaping the consequences of their recklessness and selectivity in matters related to respect for the norms of international law, which were linked to the
welcome to the United Nations clown show.
Rules-based world order. Here is your world.
We're going to be getting into the transport of Nicolás Maduro in just a little bit.
Which is horrifying,
This kind of popped
even the
up.
staunchest Atlanticists. Mr. President, we extend our firm solidarity with the people of Venezuela in the face of the external aggression. We firmly support and completely support the policy of the Bolivarian government, which is geared towards protection of their national interests and the sovereignty of the country. Washington's aggressive acts have already been condemned by many states and multilateral associations, including the Non-Aligned Movement, the African Union, as well as a group of friends in defense of the Charter of the United Nations. We hope that the international banditry will immediately be met with objective and comprehensive assessment at the international legal level with United Nations, universal mechanisms, and other multilateral formats being brought to bear. This process must not be impacted by the recognition or non-recognition by any given states or groups of states of the legitimacy of Nicolás Maduro. For this reason, unintelligible murmurings and attempts to avoid principled assessments by those who, in other circumstances, froth at the mouth and demand that others respect the UN Charter, today seem particularly hypocritical and unseemly. We hope you will recognize this, and we hope that you will abandon double standards and that you will not attempt to justify such an egregious act of aggression due to a fear of angering the American global gendarme, which is attempting to once again rear its head. We are particularly appalled by the unparalleled cynicism with which Washington did not even attempt to conceal the true aims of its criminal operation, namely the establishment of unbridled control over Venezuela's natural resources and the assertion of their hegemonical ambitions in Latin America.
Good morning.
In this way, Washington is generating fresh momentum for neocolonialism and for imperialism, which were repeatedly, decisively condemned and repudiated by the peoples of this region and by the global South as a whole. Distinguished colleagues, under these circumstances, it is exceedingly important for the entire international community to unite and to definitively reject the methods and tools of U.S. military foreign policy, which
I don't know how many divisions they have.
in the case of Venezuela. This is the only way it is possible to compel Washington to revisit and to abandon their dangerous misconceptions. As we stated during previous meetings on Venezuela, the bell now tolls across the region, ringing for every country of the Western Hemisphere. The bell is ringing for all UN member states and for the future of the organization itself. Failing to hear this call today is tantamount to projecting cowardice and the lack of principle, essentially blessing ongoing encroachments of international law and rejecting civilized international conduct as a whole. We cannot allow the United States to proclaim itself as some kind of a supreme judge, which alone bears the right to invade any country, to label culprits, to hand down and to enforce punishments, irrespective of notions of international law, sovereignty, and non-intervention. Is this the world we sought to attain as we marked the 80th anniversary of the adoption of the Charter of the United Nations, when we all signed on to the relevant Security Council presidential statement? Is this the aim of United Nations reform, which we all advocate? Or has the United Nations and Security Council thereof, do they no longer exist? And is there need now to seek from Washington a patent to rule, so to speak? And is the self-determination of every person's and their right to determine their future worthless? These are the questions that we all must address today. And if
one of them
this
called it a
response
full-scale
is
military
sincere,
attack,
if it
and
is
that's not what happened.
then perhaps the U.S. leadership, too, which openly is asserting intention to run another country for the benefit of the United States, they will perhaps glance at their own constitution, their constitution of the United States, which begins with the words, "We the people of the United States," and will begin, in fact, to recognize the sovereignty of other states rather than deposing inconvenient regimes. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation, and now
How is this happening? You know what I mean? How is this happening? This.
give the floor to the representative of China.
China.
主席，
President.
中方支持安理会就美国对委内瑞拉发动军事打击召开紧急会议。感谢迪卡洛副秘书长宣读古特雷斯秘书长的通报。我认真听取了通报人的发言，欢迎委内瑞拉常驻代表和其他国家代表出席会议。1月3日，美国悍然对委内瑞拉发动大规模军事打击，强行控制委内瑞拉总统
forcibly seized Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife and took them out of the country. It claimed that it will run Venezuela and even didn't rule out launching a second round of military operations on an even larger scale. China is deeply shocked by and strongly condemns the unilateral illegal and bullying acts of the U.S. For some time now, the international community
Wasn't
has
unilateral.
repeatedly expressed grave concern over the U.S. sanctions, blockade, and threats of force against Venezuela. The Council convened 2 emergency meetings, during which Secretary General Guterres, many Council members, and countries in the region and beyond unanimously called for abiding by the UN Charter and the international law, maintaining calm and restraint, resolving disputes peacefully, de-escalating tensions, and safeguarding regional stability. However, as a permanent member of the Council, the U.S. has disregarded the grave concerns of the international community, wantonly trampled upon Venezuela's sovereignty, security, and legitimate rights and interests, and seriously violated the principles of sovereign equality, non-interference in internal affairs.
Good morning. Come in.
peaceful
This is a
settlement of
UN
international
emergency meeting.
disputes,
Then we are
and
going to show you the
prohibition
transport
the
of
use
Nicolás
of
Maduro to
force
his
in international
arraignment
relations.
before a U.S.
These
judge
principles
in federal court
constitute
today.
the fundamental tenets of the UN Charter and form the cornerstone of maintaining international peace and security. The U.S. has placed its own power above multilateralism and military action above diplomatic efforts, posing a grave threat to peace
Exactly.
and security in Latin
China shouldn't be
America
talking
and
about
the
how to treat
Caribbean,
citizens. Is
and
that what you're saying?
indeed internationally. China firmly opposes this, and the international community has also expressed widespread grave concern and strong condemnation. We urge the U.S. to heed the overwhelming voice of the international community, abide by international law and the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, cease infringing upon the sovereignty and security of other countries, stop toppling the government of Venezuela, and return to the path of political solutions through dialogue and negotiations. We call on the U.S. to ensure the personal safety of President Maduro and his wife and to release them at once. We support the Council in fulfilling its primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security, and we support all efforts by the UN Secretary General, regional countries, and organizations that contribute to promoting dialogue and de-escalating the situation. President, the lessons of history are a stark warning. Military means are not the solution to problems, and the indiscriminate use of force will only lead to greater crisis. The U.S. bypassed the Council to launch military operations against Iraq, blatantly attacked Iran's nuclear facilities, and imposed economic sanctions, military strikes, and even armed occupations on multiple countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. These actions have caused persistent conflict, instability, and
Sounds like a little
suffering
peanut butter
for
and
the
jello
ordinary people.
from
Did
China.
these actions
China.
bring peace and stability? Did they bring development and prosperity?
China.
The international community sees this clearly. Venezuela is an independent sovereign state with every right to defend its sovereignty and national dignity. Countries in Latin America and the Caribbean are important forces in maintaining world peace and stability and promoting global development and prosperity, and they have every right to independently choose their development paths and partners. No country can act as the world's police, nor can any state presume to be the international judge. China firmly supports the government and people of Venezuela in safeguarding their sovereignty, security, and legitimate rights and interests. We firmly support the regional countries in upholding the status of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace. We demand that the United States change its course, cease its bullying and coercive
They have
practices,
some
develop
nerve over
relations
here.
and cooperation
I'll tell you
with regional
what.
countries on the basis of mutual respect, equality, and non-interference in international
Go.
affairs. China stands ready
Ivor,
to work
thank you
with
for
the regional
coming.
countries and the international community to strengthen solidarity and cooperation, uphold fairness and justice, and jointly safeguard peace and stability in Latin America and the Caribbean. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement.
Unreal.
And now give the floor to the representative of Liberia.
Liberia? What?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3 members, namely the Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, and my own country, Liberia. We thank the presidency
Why are they even
for
here?
promptly convening this important meeting.
Someone check their ID.
We congratulate Somalia on assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month.
Liberia.
Warmly welcome all new members. The A3
This is news with a twist.
appreciates
Okay.
USG DiCarlo's comprehensive briefing and listened carefully to the remarks offered by civil society representatives. We also
Liberia.
welcome
Check it in.
the
What?
representative of Venezuela
Yeah.
and the representatives of the region to this meeting. Mr. President, the A3 aligns itself with the recent communique of the African Union on the situation in the Bolivarian Republic.
They're not
of
giving him
Venezuela,
back. Just
and
let's just go
continues
right
to
there.
monitor developments there with deep concerns.
Yeah, another Tim Walz dropping out of the
We note
gubernatorial
reports
race, by the way.
regarding the detention of President Nicolás Maduro and his
We
wife,
saw that coming.
and incidents involving Venezuelan institutions. Such developments present serious challenges not only to Venezuela's internal stability, but also underscore the imperative to safeguard the broader peace and security of the region. The A3 remains steadfast in its commitment to the fundamental principles of international law, including the full respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states as enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations in the interest of regional stability and international peace. We believe these are essential foundations for international cooperation and peaceful coexistence. Our position underscores the importance of dialogue, the peaceful settlement of disputes, and respect for constitutional and institutional frameworks. Mr. President, the complex situation in Venezuela requires a comprehensive response that is both inclusive and nationally owned.
The part about this is that the response is over. The response already happened. They're not giving him back. Okay?
That a sustainable and peaceful resolution can only be found through
give him back. How about no?
Constructive dialogue among Venezuelans themselves with genuine respect for the aspiration and rights of the Venezuelan people and with the constructive support of the international community. The A3 expresses its solidarity with the people of Venezuela and reiterates the African Union's commitment to peace, stability, and mutual respect.
Liberia's commitment to peace? Really? Okay.
Among nations and regions.
Wow.
It's important for all parties, both within Venezuela and in the broader international community, to exercise restraint and responsibility, upholding international law and avoiding any action that could escalate tension or threaten regional stability. The A3 stands ready to support all efforts within this council and in cooperation with regional partners to facilitate a peaceful, inclusive, and lasting resolution to the situation in Venezuela. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Liberia for the statement.
All right.
And now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Uh-oh.
Mr. President, thank you for chairing. And I particularly want to thank you, Mr. Freitas, for your briefing. And I'll point out that Mr. Freitas is in exile, having fled the regime. Thank you for your courage, and thank you for shedding a light on the true atrocities of the illegitimate Maduro regime. This past weekend,
now we're talking.
Colleagues, the United States successfully carried out a surgical law enforcement operation facilitated by the U.S. military against two indicted fugitives of American justice, narco-terrorist Nicolás Maduro and Celia Flores. Colleagues, Nicolás Maduro is responsible for attacks on the people of the United States, for destabilizing the Western Hemisphere, and illegitimately repressing the people of Venezuela. As Secretary Rubio has said, there is no war against Venezuela or its people. We are not occupying a country. This was a law enforcement operation.
I wear my sunglasses to bed, so yes.
In furtherance of lawful indictments that have existed for decades. The United States arrested a narco-trafficker who is now going to stand trial in the United States in accordance with the rule of law for the crimes he's committed against our people for 15 years. A similar action was taken in 1989 against Manuel Noriega. He was arrested, indicted, convicted in a court of law.
That's right.
Served in prison in the United States and in Panama, and the Panamanian people, the American people, are safer for it, and undeniably, the region was more stable.
Now we're cooking with gas.
This law enforcement action was directed consistent with the President of the United States' responsibility as Commander-in-Chief to protect Americans at home and abroad against a fugitive who is directly responsible for narco-terrorism that has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans and created destabilizing violence throughout our hemisphere. Nicolás Maduro and his co-defendant, Celia Flores, have been transferred here to the United States to stand trial for their crimes. Maduro was indicted by a grand jury in the Southern District of New York and faces very serious criminal charges for his involvement in a wide-ranging conspiracy to conduct narco-terrorism, to traffic cocaine and other drugs, and conducting international weapons trafficking. The overwhelming evidence of his crimes will be presented openly in U.S. court proceedings.
Maduro.
Colleagues, Maduro is not just an indicted drug trafficker. He was an illegitimate so-called president. He was not a head of state. For years, Maduro and his cronies have manipulated Venezuela's electoral system to maintain their illegitimate grip on power. In fact, just 2 years ago in 2024, a UN panel of experts report found that the election in that year was absolutely and completely a farce and fell well short of the most basic transparency and integrity measures essential to upholding credible elections. If the UN and the United Nations in this body confers legitimacy on an illegitimate narco-terrorist and the same treatment in this charter of a democratically elected president or head of state, what kind of organization is this? We should note that over 50 countries, many nations, including the European Union, including a number of Latin American countries in the region, and of course the United States, again, over 50 countries rejected the legitimacy of Maduro's re-election following the disputed 2024 elections and do not recognize him as Venezuela's legitimately elected president. Maduro unlawfully refused to peacefully cede power after the Venezuelan people voted him out of office in the 2024 election. So therefore, Maduro was a fugitive from justice. He is the head of a vicious foreign terrorist organization, Cartel de los Soles. This regime-sponsored enterprise coordinates with and relies on other vicious criminal organizations, namely Tren de Aragua, again, among others, to carry out its objective of using illegal narcotics as a weapon against the United States. And for its part, Tren de Aragua is a designated foreign terrorist organization with thousands of members, many of whom have unlawfully infiltrated the United States and are conducting irregular warfare and undertaking hostile actions against the American people and against the United States. It's terrorizing criminals commit brutal crimes, including murders.
Hit that like button for me, guys. Let's get this video out there.
And human, drug, and weapons
Jump in the chat.
trafficking. This administration,
hit those notifications.
President Trump, will not stand for it. In fact, in March of 2025, President Trump declared that Tren de Aragua is quote, Tren de Aragua is undertaking hostile actions and conducting irregular warfare against the territory of the United States, both directly and at the direction, clandestine or otherwise, of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. Maduro and his cronies have partnered with some of the most violent and prolific drug traffickers and narco-terrorists in the world for decades, facilitating the flood of illegal drugs coming in the United States, estimated to be several hundred tons annually. He has become rich, incredibly wealthy.
That's a lot
off
of blow.
the misery of untold numbers of Americans, Venezuelans, and others, aiding and abetting international terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, coordinating with corrupt Iranian officials, and other malign actors to influence not only the region, but to malignly influence the United States.
What?
In fact, in its own 2025 World Drug Report, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime identified Venezuela as a key trafficking route in the Western Hemisphere for illegal drugs, predominantly cocaine, entering the United States and increasingly
He's
Europe.
sweating.
As Secretary Rubio stated just yesterday, this is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live.
Donkey.
And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be used as a base of operation for our nation's adversaries and competitors and rivals of the United States. You can't turn Venezuela into the operating hub for Iran, for Hezbollah, for gangs, for Cuban intelligence agents, and other malign actors that control that country. You cannot continue to have the largest energy reserves in the world under the control of adversaries of the United States, under the control of illegitimate leaders, and not benefiting the people of Venezuela, and stolen by a handful of oligarchs inside of Venezuela. But it doesn't stop there. Numerous UN and international human rights organizations have issued reports documenting serious human rights abuses by the Maduro regime, including reports of extrajudicial killings, political prisoners, torture, and arbitrary and unlawful detentions. In fact, over 8 million Venezuelans have fled the country, destabilizing their neighbors
8 million
in the region
Venezuelans
and creating
fled
the
the
world's
country.
largest refugee crisis. Members of this council, colleagues, the United States wants a better future for Venezuela. We believe a better future for the people of Venezuela and for the people of the region and the world is stabilizing the region and making the neighborhood that we live in a much better and safer place. And this is why millions of Venezuelans that have fled this brutal regime are celebrating and cheering around the world as this body pontificates,
Right.
including those celebrating or including in my home state of Florida, where hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans have fled this regime's brutality. I want to reiterate, President Trump gave diplomacy a chance. He offered Maduro multiple off-ramps. He tried to de-escalate. Maduro refused to take them. President Trump made it clear that the narco-terrorism must stop, and yet it continued. The United States will not waver in our actions to protect Americans from the scourge of narco-terrorism and seeks peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States and now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Oh, geez, Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Extendemos la más cordial bienvenida
I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the representatives of Bahrain, Colombia, Liberia, Latvia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and who have joined the Security Council as elected members and who are joining us today in the chamber. And we congratulate
Okay, remember, Panama, former home of Manuel Noriega. Okay, let's listen. We'll listen.
On assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month. I'd like to thank the Secretary General for Political Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, for her detailed report representing Secretary General Antonio Guterres. She's briefed us on the situation under discussion today. We're also very grateful for the very valuable presentations by Mr. Jeffrey Sachs
Why is this guy even allowed
Ms.
to build
Mercedes de
it?
Freitas.
That's what I want to know.
In this context, the Republic of Panama
Asking questions.
would like to refer to the situation that has taken place in the territory of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, which is of concern due to its possible impact on peace and regional stability. However, in the light of the unfortunate reality of the facts that we've seen, we now need to turn our attention constructively towards the future of Venezuela. However, it's important to point out that in terms of a constant principle of our foreign policy, Panama would like to reiterate our unfailing commitment to multilateralism, to the sovereignty of states, and to the
it's not a war.
International law, especially the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter, including non-intervention, respect for territorial integrity, and the prohibition of the use of force. This is mentioned in Article 2 of the United Nations Charter. These principles are, and they continue to be, the indispensable framework for the peaceful coexistence between nations. Panama also believes it's necessary to highlight that the situation Venezuela is facing is unfolding in an environment marked by the disregard for the will of its people, as well as by a sustained erosion of democratic institutions. In this regard, Panama reiterates that it does not and will not recognize the authoritarian and illegitimate regime that has held Venezuelan men and women hostage, plunged them into one of the gravest political, social, humanitarian, and security crises in our region. Unfortunately, we have witnessed how the situation has gradually deteriorated
I wouldn't say stupid shit like that in the chat.
especially over the last
That's
year,
going to get banned.
with increased
Secret Service going to come knocking on your door.
erosion of democracy,
You dummy.
the hollowing out of institutions, and the rise of authoritarian and repressive practices, which have contributed to an unfortunate outcome, and therefore cannot be ignored by the international community. In particular, It is essential to call for the unconditional release of persons detained for political reasons. Many of them have been deprived of their liberty merely for raising their voices in a context in which dissent is not tolerated. From this moment on, we must demand that all political prisoners that the regime continues to hold hostage, Venezuelans and foreigners alike, be released without delay. Their physical well-being and safety must be guaranteed. Likewise, freedom of expression and the unequivocal respect for human rights must be immediately ensured. In this context, Panama underscores that its position does not stem solely from a principled democratic solidarity, but also from direct impact. A Panamanian citizen, Mr. Olmedo Nunez,
hit that like button for me, guys. Like and subscribe.
Detained in Venezuela,
UN emergency meeting.
without due process, without full access to a defense, and without effective consular guarantees. Added to this is the human impact of a multidimensional crisis that has forced around 9 million Venezuelans, men and women, to leave their homes, compelled to live in displacement and vulnerability as a consequence of the institutional and social collapse generated by the regime. A crisis that has had significant regional repercussions, reflected both in the irregular migration flows from south to north of a significant number of Venezuelan nationals, as well as reverse migration movements, including also a lot of Venezuelans, the effects of which are felt particularly in countries of transit and destination that this affects, including Panama. And this has decisively contributed to illegal migration. In the face of this reality, Panama issues a clear and firm call for Venezuela's short-term future to be fully democratic. Power emanates from the people, and as stated by His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Panama, José Raúl Molino, the people, the true sovereign, have already spoken at the polls, granting an indisputable victory with 70% of the votes on July 28, 2024, to the opposition candidate, Mr. Edmundo González Urrutia, as well as to Maria Corina Machado, who was prevented by the regime from running despite having won the primary with 93% of the votes on October 22, 2023. Additionally, the popularity of both has increased in recent months, including among police and military sectors. The elected government has the teams and work.
We're going to forward this guy. He is putting me to sleep.
National law and the UN Charter must be upheld. All efforts now focus on ensuring de-escalation and stability in Venezuela, based on inclusive dialogue and broad societal support. Latvia encourages all relevant actors to prioritize diplomatic efforts and work collectively towards a peaceful, democratic, and
Latvia is a country?
Venezuela.
Is there a country called Latvia?
Latvia
Where is
stands
that?
in solidarity with the people of Venezuela and their right to freedom and democracy. Rights that were not respected by the Maduro regime during 2024 presidential elections and before, and which remain unmet to this day. The regime of Nicolás Maduro was rooted in mass repression, corruption, organized crime, including drug trafficking, and posed a grave threat to security of the region and the world. It has repeatedly violated the UN Charter and undermined international law, including through open support for Russia's aggression against Ukraine. The Maduro regime does not represent the will of the Venezuelan people and has relied on widespread, systematic repressions of human rights across the country to maintain power. 8 million Venezuelans have been forced to flee the country since 2014. Latvia also remains committed to working jointly together with partners to counter global transnational organized crime networks, including in Latin America and Caribbean. Such criminal activities
Let him
place
throw
the
down the
lives of
insult.
countless
It's fine.
people at grave risk,
Let it cook.
particularly women and children. Addressing these challenges requires sustained cooperation in full respect of international law.
This is live from the
Latvia
UN.
continues to closely monitor the situation in Venezuela and stands prepared to continue working with its partners to support a peaceful, democratic, and just transition that reflects the aspirations of the Venezuelan people. And I thank you.
Why don't you sound Scottish?
I thank the representative of Latvia for her statement, and now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank Undersecretary General Di Carlo for her briefing on behalf of the Secretary General. We also listened carefully to the briefing by Ms. De Freitas and Mr. Sachs. Mr. President, Denmark joins the Secretary General in
okay if they
expressing
insult me.
deep
Doesn't
concern
matter.
over the evolving situation in Venezuela. Since this Council met to discuss the situation 2 weeks ago, we have seen a drastic escalation, culminating in a large-scale military operation on January 3rd. At our last meeting, Denmark urged all actors to strictly adhere to international law and to de-escalate tensions and exercise the necessary restraint. Today, we echo the Secretary General in his concern regarding the worrying implications of this military action. Independent of the situation in Venezuela, these developments constitute a dangerous precedent. International law and the UN Charter, as a pillar of the international security architecture, must be respected by all states. Denmark recalls the foundational principle of international law that forbids states from threatening or using force against another state's territorial integrity and political independence. This imperative is enshrined in Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the UN Charter. Members of the UN Security Council have a special responsibility to uphold these principles. The principles of sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity must be respected. The inviolability of borders is not up for negotiation. These are universal, sacrosanct principles enshrined in international law. They apply everywhere. Mr. President, once again, Denmark calls on all parties to urgently de-escalate tensions that could threaten peace and stability in the region and beyond. International disputes should be settled by peaceful means, as stated in the UN Charter. We further call on all parties to exercise maximum restraint and to engage in dialogue and diplomacy. Denmark takes note of official statements from the United States government stating that the military operations are to combat drug trafficking and stem the illicit flow of illegal narcotics. Denmark shares the priority of combating organized crime and drug trafficking, while reiterating that counter-narcotic efforts, as all other efforts, must be conducted in strict accordance with international law, including the fundamental rules and principles of the UN Charter. Mr. President, against this backdrop, Denmark wishes to recall our solidarity with the people of Venezuela. Denmark does not recognize Nicolás Maduro as the legitimate president of Venezuela.
There you go.
Following the lack of transparency and integrity in the 2024 presidential elections, which failed to meet basic democratic standards. In Maduro's attempts to cling to power, his authoritarian regime grew increasingly oppressive. His regime bears responsibility for widespread and systematic violations of human rights against his fellow citizens, and he should be held accountable. The victims of the Maduro regime's alleged crimes against humanity have to be heard. The Venezuelan people have a right to democracy and self-determination exercised through peaceful, inclusive, and credible democratic processes, free from fear of political persecution, intimidation, or repression, and external political interference. This includes the rights of Venezuelans alone to determine their political, economic, and social future.
He ain't the president
without
of
coercion
Venezuela anymore.
or manipulation by external actors. No state should seek to influence political outcomes in Venezuela through the use or threat of force or through other means inconsistent with international law. Venezuela's future can be decided only by the Venezuelans. We call on all parties and stakeholders to come together for a negotiated and peaceful transition to democratic rule in a process led by and owned by Venezuelans. At this critical and uncertain time, it is imperative that all parties fully respect human rights and international law. Denmark remains committed to supporting Venezuela and the aspirations of its people on its path to lasting political stability. I thank you.
Well, she had me for a second, but kind of lost it on the end.
Denmark for her statement, and now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Jesus.
Thank you, President. I congratulate Somalia on the assumption of the presidency of the Council for the month of January. And I thank our briefers for their remarks. Colleagues, the Venezuelan people have suffered for years. This Council now meets at a pivotal moment for Venezuela's future. Maduro's actions created extreme levels of poverty, violent repression, and failing basic services. His regime's rule
like electricity
crisis affecting the whole region. The United Kingdom has long been clear that Maduro's claim to power was fraudulent. To date,
first grader book
Venezuela's
report.
National Electoral
Steve
Council
Shelley says
has failed to publish the full results of the July 2024 presidential elections, and independent domestic and international reports also observed significant irregularities and a lack of transparency. President, the United Kingdom wants to see a safe and peaceful transition to a legitimate government that reflects the will of the Venezuelan people.
Okay.
They deserve a government which reflects their vote at the ballot box and delivers a more stable, prosperous future for all Venezuelans. Finally, President, the United Kingdom reaffirms its commitment to international law and the principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. These foundations are essential for maintaining global peace.
He's British,
and
so he's very,
thank you.
You know.
I thank the representative of the United
The
Kingdom.
man speaking was the United Nations representative for the UK.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Je voudrais d'abord vous féliciter pour votre présidence du Conseil de sécurité au mois de janvier. Je voudrais également remercier Madame Rosemary DiCarlo de nous avoir transmis les éléments du secrétaire général des Nations Unies au sujet du dernier développement intervenu. Monsieur le Président, la France est restée solidaire du peuple vénézuélien dans la crise qu'il traverse depuis de trop nombreuses années, et en particulier depuis l'été 2024. Le 28 juillet 2024, le peuple vénézuélien a exercé
This is an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council. And we're going to get to the transportation of Nicolás Maduro in just a moment.
Nonetheless has been stripped away from the people by Nicolás Maduro. Must you recall the facts? The electoral process has been marred, was marred by numerous irregularities, and the final counting of votes was marred by a flagrant lack of transparency.
Face à l'aspiration démocratique du peuple vénézuélien,
Nicolás Maduro has systematically responded with the repression of dissident voices, of members of the opposition, and of civil society, as well as with numerous arbitrary detentions. France has always expressed itself with clarity about the fact that these practices are unacceptable and that respect for human rights must be upheld.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
the
military operation which has
I'll
led
get a little forward here.
President, I wish to take this opportunity to congratulate first and foremost the Federal Republic of Somalia on its presidency of the Security Council during this month of January. We wish you every success. We also wish to take this opportunity to thank delegations whose mandate of the Council ended, namely Algeria, Guyana, the Republic of Korea, Sierra Leone, as well as Slovenia. We wish to thank them for their significant contributions to the attainment of the goals and the mission of the Council. I also wish to thank Madam Rosemary DiCarlo, Undersecretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, for her valuable
everyone's
briefing
opinions here.
related to the latest developments which have taken place in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and I wish to thank other briefers as well. We appreciate the reaffirmation by His Excellency the Secretary General of the United Nations, reaffirmation of the commitment to the fundamental principles of the Charter of the United Nations, a commitment to the peaceful
What are the gas
diplomatic
prices
resolution of
where you guys are
disputes.
from? Let me know where you're viewing from and tell me your gas prices.
For all stakeholders in Venezuela to engage in inclusive dialogue which guarantees respect for international law. And
We're live from Los
to
Angeles. They're much higher here.
tensions, to preserve regional
We're
stability,
getting
and to
F.
avoid any potential adverse repercussions for security and stability in the region. The Kingdom of Bahrain also extends its support for efforts undertaken at the regional and international levels in order to reduce tensions and to enhance diplomatic means in order to provide for international peace and security. The Kingdom stresses the importance of the promotion of international cooperation in order to support all regional and international efforts which are geared
Thank you
towards
for the
combating
super chat.
international
$5. Great Granny 101. Thank you, host, for
drugs,
bringing
as
this
well
to
as
everyone's
scourges
attention
which
and
are
allowing
related
us to see
this.
what's going on in the
This
world. Thank you very
undermines
much.
the stability of societies, undermines achievement of sustainable development. Therefore, these issues
Super
need to
chats
be
will be
dealt with in
featured
accordance with
in
international
red.
relevant conventions.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
By way of conclusion, the Kingdom of Bahrain reaffirms our support for regional and international efforts to achieve a political, lasting solution in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. This needs to be achieved through regional cooperation and with respect for national sovereignty. The goal is to provide for security and stability in Venezuela, to avoid risks of conflict and division, to protect civil peace, and to contribute to the preservation of regional security and stability, as well as international peace and security.
We are live from the United Nations in New York City.
Representative of Bahrain for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me to begin by congratulating Somalia on its assumption of the presidency for this month and assuring you of my delegation's full support and cooperation. We welcome the new members joining the Council. I thank Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for reading out the remarks of the Secretary General and the valuable briefing. We also take note of the views shared by Mr. Jeffrey Sachs and Ms. Mercedes.
Over $4 in LA
I
as
welcome
well.
the participation of the permanent representative of Venezuela
$4.43
alongside the representatives of other countries from the region and beyond in the meeting. Mr. President, Pakistan views the recent developments in Venezuela with profound concern. In a world already beset by multiple crises, escalating tensions and instability in the Caribbean do not augur well for regional and international peace and security.
Thank you.
The UN Charter enjoins us to refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The UN Charter also binds member states to sovereign equality, non-interference in the internal affairs of others, and settlement of international disputes by peaceful means.
Wow.
Unilateral military action contravenes these sacrosanct
286 in
principles
Clearwater.
and the doctrine of sovereign immunity. Such actions set dangerous precedents that risk eroding the foundations of the global legal framework. They also fuel instability, which, as history has shown time and again, can lead to unpredictable and uncontrollable outcomes for years to come. Mr. President, at this critical juncture, the path forward must be one of dialogue and diplomacy. Durable solutions to political differences can only be found through peaceful means, with full respect for the will of the Venezuelan people, free from any external interference. We hope that Latin American and the Caribbean region, as a zone of peace, will remain free from conflict and confrontation and continue its march towards enhanced regional cooperation and improved prosperity for the people. we urge all parties to exercise maximum restraint, de-escalate tensions, pursue peaceful coexistence,
Pennsylvania, New
refrain from
Jersey,
any
between
actions
$2
that
to
could
$3.50.
exacerbate the volatile situation, and engage in dialogue, including by utilizing the sincere offers of mediation. The good offices of the Secretary General also always remain available for that purpose. Lastly, Mr. President, I affirm Pakistan's commitment to contributing constructively to the discharge of the Security Council's primary responsibility for addressing the threat to international peace and security by diffusing tensions, promoting pacific settlement, and upholding respect for international law and the UN Charter. Peace and stability of Venezuela and the welfare and prosperity of its people, with full ownership, must be the overriding objective of all efforts. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement and now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
God, this guy.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to congratulate Somalia for assuming the presidency of the Council for the month of January, and I would like to welcome the newly elected members joining the Council. I would also like to thank USG DiCarlo for her briefing on behalf of the Secretary General, as well as Mr. Sachs and Ms. De Freitas for their remarks. Mr. President, Greece is closely monitoring developments in Venezuela. We urge all actors to exercise maximum restraint and to refrain from actions that would deepen the crisis and undermine prospects for peace and stability. Greece reiterates that the Charter of the United Nations and international law, including human rights law, must always be respected. We also recall the obligation of all parties to protect civilians, especially in times of heightened tensions. Greece shares the priority of combating transnational organized crime and drug trafficking, which pose a significant security threat worldwide. We reiterate that these challenges should be addressed through sustained cooperation in full respect of international law. Mr. President, Greece firmly believes that dialogue and diplomacy are the only viable tools for a peaceful transition and a sustainable resolution of the crisis. We join the Secretary General in encouraging all actors in Venezuela to engage in inclusive and meaningful dialogue in full respect of human rights, democratic principles, and the rule of law. We have long been clear that Nicolás Maduro's and illegitimate president's claim to power lacks legitimacy. Greece has not recognized the results of the rigged elections of July 28, 2024, and has always supported initiatives aimed at achieving a democratic solution for Venezuela.
This live stream is already at 100,000 views. I thank everybody for checking in. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video with a friend.
The hope that the recent events will lead to this effect. The voices of all Venezuelans need to be heard, and they deserve governance that reflects their will through peaceful and inclusive processes. In this spirit, we will continue to support efforts aimed at achieving a peaceful, negotiated transition that ensures the will of all Venezuelans is fully respected. Greece stands ready to support all regional and international efforts aimed at the peaceful resolution of the crisis in line with the Charter of the United Nations and international law. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for this statement and now give the floor to the representative of Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Antes de abordar el fondo de
Before coming to the substance of our statement today, I think we need to make an institutional clarification. We note with concern that an attempt is being made.
Now, we can get back to this. We're just going to jump over to the transport of Nicolás Maduro to court, because that is going to be starting momentarily.
Into this park, again, there's a helicopter waiting that will transport him across the harbor and into Lower Manhattan, where he will appear in court later on this morning. Stay with us. We're going to follow this all the way until he gets into Manhattan. For now, we're live over Brooklyn. John Del Giorno, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
And you can see there some of the transportation vehicles bringing Nicolás Maduro.
Probably along the FDR Drive. I would see the local streets in Lower Manhattan as well. But again, we're watching this moment right here. You can see it looks like Maduro is being ready to be moved from that armored vehicle over to the helicopter. So we will keep these live pictures up. Again, we've seen NYPD both on the ground and in the air. There's an additional NYPD helicopter up in the airspace with us, but we've also seen heavily armed law enforcement officers down there providing security. So we'll leave this picture up, Pedro, and we'll see how the situation develops as he gets moved from that vehicle over to the helicopter.
This is just moments ago, transporting Nicolás Maduro to his federal court date today. And then we're going to go to a live shot. There he is. There he is.
Crazy or what?
Wow. There he is. Nicolás Maduro being transported into federal court. Look at the security. Those guys are on edge. Let's take it right to a, well, you know what? Let's hang on this for a minute. Get him in the car. Transporting Nicolás Maduro during a UN Security Council emergency meeting, which we were just watching. And there's the wife, Celia. I'm surprised they're in the same vehicle. Wow. History in the making, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, how was it the first time? Yeah, that's true.
Nicolás Maduro and his wife Celia being transported to federal court.
Probably be driving a bus in Disney in his retirement.
All right,
that's just hit the walk right there. Out of the vehicles into the helicopter. Wow. Nicolás Maduro headed to federal court. And we'll get to a live shot in just a minute. Put your head down. That is quite a perp walk. Woo.
We are standing by for you.
I don't think they're giving him back. I mean,
yes. Yeah. Live.
And let's
great job. They're going to come back to
Manhattan. And there is the perp walk from January 3rd.
night. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Maduro said, Happy New Year. Live in Manhattan. Wow. Wow. That's a lot. And they are bringing him in heavy. Whoop, whoop, whoop. This is a live shot. Security detail. The full perp walk. And here it is again. Happy New Year. He said Happy New Year.
Good night. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So we're going to go to this other live shot outside the courthouse. Heavy security today. Happy New Year. NYPD, DEA, likely some Homeland Security. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share, guys. Live in New York. .500 Pearl Street, the federal courthouse. Yeah, thumbs up or thumbs down. Fork it over. Right outside the courthouse. And we will be heading to another shot here.
Maduro is currently being loaded into an armored truck there by federal forces, where he will then be taken for his first court appearance, which is expected to happen around noon Eastern time. later today. That's a live picture right now of federal authorities loading Maduro into that armored truck. As we've been discussing, later today, he and his wife expected to make their first U.S. appearance here in Manhattan. Maduro is facing serious charges, including
they put them in the same vehicle. That must be a comfortable conversation.
Terrorism conspiracy.
4 other senior Venezuelan officials.
What do you think the wife is saying to Maduro in the back of that vehicle?
Including Maduro's son, are also named in the indictment. They are accused of working with Maduro to support international drug trafficking organizations.
We'll keep an eye on this right now and bring in NBC News correspondent Sam Brock, who's at the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, where Maduro is about to be heading to. Sam, good morning. Recap for us. What exactly is the government alleging here? What are the charges Maduro's facing?
Yeah, Joe, Savannah, good morning. Just to set the scene here first, countless cameras, as you would imagine, huge police presence. And as you were just describing, Joe, a second ago, we watched within the last 15 or 20 minutes as Nicolás Maduro, the deposed former leader of Venezuela, and his wife, Cilia Flores, were taken from an armored car to another vehicle where they were transported to a helipad, flown by helicopter to the Wall Street helipad. And now we're in the process of being taken here to the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. The expectation it's going to take several hours to process them. In terms of the charges that Maduro is facing, so first of all, it's Maduro, Cilia Flores, his son, and 3 other top lieutenants, although we believe it is just going to be Maduro and his wife in court today. Not exactly clear the status of the other people that were indicted. But as far as the charges that they're facing, Joe, you mentioned narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy. The indictment lays out in very clear terms over 20-some-odd pages how Maduro had spent years coordinating with some of the most notorious drug cartels in the world, from Tren de Aragua in Venezuela.
And let's get to a helicopter shot just from earlier this morning. Maduro being transported. Have a look.
Helicopter make its way from Brooklyn to Lower Manhattan. Take a look at this. That is the now deposed, ousted Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores aboard that helicopter, heading to that heliport. This is the kind of caravan process movement that we've been watching since really just right at the top of the show for the last 30 minutes then, as the leader and his wife are making their way to a federal courthouse in Manhattan to face a federal judge for the first time since the U.S. military operation that occurred in the early hours of Saturday morning in Caracas, that then captured, detained, arrested, and now it has indicted the former Venezuelan leader and his wife, Cilia Flores. Let's keep an eye on this as this helicopter is going to land, and then we will be seeing, obviously, we would assume that we will then see.
And we are monitoring this story here on the Zero Dark Touring channel. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share.
We have people staked out all along the way to bring you this. We're now seeing Nicolás Maduro departing, coming out of that helicopter. We're going to see his wife probably depart right after that. He's going to be now getting into, we assume, we'll be getting into another vehicle and heading to the courthouse. Just remarkable to see this. It was just until early morning hours of Saturday that this man and his wife were running a country of more than 30 million people. And then that dramatic and violent U.S. military operation taking place that has now captured them and now making their way with their hands bound in those tan jumpsuits to be facing a federal judge. Let's go to that federal courthouse where Maduro is going to be heading right now. Omar Jimenez is standing by watching this along with us. Omar, it's a pretty remarkable thing to see as he's making his way towards where you are right now.
Yeah, you know, and the preparations for this have really been noticeable on the ground here. Obviously, there's always a stepped up federal security presence to begin with outside this federal courthouse. But here you have barricades up. You actually have
it's not a war. It's not an invasion.
Outside the entrance of the courthouse, waiting to go in once those doors actually open. And as you see some of those images, I mean, you see Nicolás Maduro. You and I talked about it to start the show, just how quickly things change. Where now he is literally being flanked by DEA agents in a tan suit alongside his wife.
That is where he was.
Walked down a
Metro
very
Detention
visible
Center
path from this heliport in the southern part of Manhattan here. From there, we're expecting, obviously, they'll be in vehicles and making their way.
And hit that like button for me, guys. Subscribe and share.
We expect that hearing to happen a little bit later this morning, but also to critically begin this legal process that the Trump administration has in part used as justification for the abduction and capture of Maduro, to have him face
Maduro on his drug walk came out and said happy New Year to everybody.
They say has contributed to, as they allege, hundreds of tons of importation of cocaine and things of that.
He was probably like, can you put me in a different car than my wife, please?
Nature. And so just to see how this has developed so quickly over the last few days. And, I heard you all talking about sort of the mode of transportation and sort of taking the helicopter over the water as opposed to taking the bridge. That was something that we actually noticed Saturday night as well, where traffic would have been much lighter. And
Do you
when
have to
they
put
landed
in this
on the
car?
western part of Manhattan, rather than just driving, they took the helicopter across the water as well. But again, critically, we're waiting for them by ground to arrive here at this courthouse to begin this next stage, Kate.
Yeah, this
Absolutely, Omar. We're so thankful that you're there watching it all play out. To track this was that they're now back into
Not a
another
war,
armored
not
vehicle
an invasion.
and will be leaving
It was an extraction.
the airport shortly, heading
A
out with that
tactical
caravan. You would
extraction.
assume headed right to where Omar Jimenez is at that federal courthouse.
Thank you, Kate. Joining us now, CNN political and global affairs commentator Sabrina Singh. Also with us, CNN national security analyst Alex Plitzis. I'm going to start with you, Alex. You have gotten some new details about this operation, about the extraction of the former president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, as we have been watching these pictures, historic pictures of him heading towards his first appearance in a Manhattan court. What have you learned?
So in speaking to CIA and Department of Defense officials over the weekend and then coming into this morning, this was the culmination of months of preparation and training. So it's clear the decision to do this, or at least be prepared for it, was made many months ago. There was a full mock-up facility that was built, very similar to what was done for the bin Laden raid, that was trained on for months by the Army's Delta Force, along with members of the FBI hostage recovery team, who augmented the military because this was a law enforcement operation where they ended up arresting and then extracting Maduro. There's some contention over whether it's law enforcement or military if you listen to members of Congress, but for all intents and purposes, those were the authorities it was executed under. Why that type of thing is important.
If it was a war and an invasion, there wouldn't be anything left. Okay? Let's just get that straight.
Important is when you have a mock facility, you use it to train and then to determine the timeline, preparation, how long does it take to get there, how long will you be on the objective, and small details matter. So, for example, the bin Laden raid, when the CIA built the mock-up facility, they used a chain link fence around the perimeter as opposed to like the 18-foot thick walls at the compound. And so when they trained on it, the rotor wash from the helicopter actually escaped during preparation and training. But when they were in Abbottabad afterwards and they were flying, that didn't happen when the helos went down. So those types of things are incredibly important for preparation.
Yeah, you're talking about sort of this
Delta Force made a
planning
mock-up
very
structure
similar to the intense planning in
train
Abbottabad to try and extract or to
make
eventually
the
kill
extraction
Osama bin Laden. In
swift
this case,
and
they took
safe as
pains
possible.
to make sure that Maduro and his wife were kept alive. I do want to go to you, Sabrina, because we've been hearing a lot from
Have a
the
great day there,
president
Whiteside.
in the
See ya.
last 24 hours about what his plans are for Venezuela as we watch these historic pictures of the former president of Venezuela being taken into U.S. custody, taken to court on a myriad of charges. And the president has said that the United States will run Venezuela. He's been asked that over and over, and his answer has been consistent. So what would it take for the United States to actually run Venezuela when you
get all the
consider
different
the
coverage from all the
complications going
different
on there right now?
stations?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I think to put things in perspective, I mean, Venezuela is about twice the size of California or even Iraq. So to run a country with 30 million people, and Donald Trump says that we are running Venezuela, that I think there are a lot of outstanding questions. And I hope that members of Congress on both sides of the aisle are pressing this administration for more details, because if we are, quote, running Venezuela,
that's an interesting point. Who will represent him in court?
Of military assets on the ground. And you heard, yesterday President Trump saying that we're going to extract the wealth from Venezuela from the oil fields. Well, if companies are going to go into Venezuela and start extracting oil, these oil fields are also going to have to be secured. So again, I have so
That is true. We're going to go live outside the courthouse just to see what's going on here for a minute. Security is heavy. Maduro is being processed right now. That should take some time. And we should have some reports shortly. They got him in early. I think they'll get him in front of the... I don't think they want this to be something that lasts very long with this security threat. I think they want this to go pretty quickly. Then we're going to go to another shot from earlier here, and you can see Maduro's son and 3 other officials are also named in the federal indictment.
Effectively subverting legitimate political and military institutions for drug trafficking. The indictment lays out, in its own words, a relentless campaign of distributing cocaine to the United States, which led to the death of Americans, as you're looking right now at live images of that truck, that armored car, transporting Maduro right now to the federal courthouse where we are standing. So this could all be transpiring, really, in terms of getting him to the location to start the processing, really within the next several minutes, you would imagine. But those are the charges that they're facing, and the narco-terrorism, of course, is the biggest umbrella charge. There's weapons-related charges as well, but obviously all of it very serious, guys.
Yeah, quick drive. Again, live pictures on your screen right now
walk.
in a vehicle in the middle of that convoy there. Maduro
That's
traveling
great.
from what Sam pointed out as the
Jeff
Wall
Chopper
Street
says plug walk.
helipad that's right down in lower Manhattan, and really just
Thank you
quite a
very
brief
much.
drive to where you are, Sam, at the federal courthouse, where we'll see him shortly. What do we expect in court today? Do Maduro and his
Master
wife have an
Golfer
attorney?
says, I'm surprised Mamdani didn't greet him to shake his hand. You guys are
Yes, so
cooking
that
it
is
today.
one of the big questions going into this, right? First of
We
all,
love
the
it.
expectation
Thank you
is
so much.
it's going to be an arraignment. They're not appearing before a magistrate. They are appearing before a senior U.S. District Court judge. So it's the initial appearance, probably an arraignment where they'll be asked to plead. But the question about whether or not they're going to have representation and who that might be is very much open-ended, because with respect to Maduro, he's been under U.S. sanctions, guys. He's had assets frozen. It's not even clear whether or not he can hire an American law firm. It might be a court-assigned attorney. If it is, Maduro...
What do you guys think? Is he going to have to get a public defender, or will he be able to hire his own lawyer? His assets have been frozen. He doesn't... I don't think he has much of a choice here.
Request consultation with the attorneys before they actually enter a plea. So this could be
Let me
10
know in the
minutes,
chat.
it could be an hour. Typically, you know, in arraignments like this, you're not only going to have a brief recap of the charges, but also the judge would ask how long representation needs to prepare for trial. No doubt this is something that's going to take a year or longer, years potentially. There will certainly be motions filed, whoever ultimately represents Maduro, on the basis that the legality of his capture should be challenged because it violated
That's right. The judge
international
is
law.
92-year-old Alvin Hellerstein.
These are all things that are going to play out in the weeks to come. But right now, will there be a plea? Who will his attorney or representation consist of? Those are the things we're going to be watching out for in a matter of hours, as the arraignment is expected to take place at noon today.
Judge Alvin Hellerstein is a Clinton appointee.
We're keeping a close eye on Maduro right
Thank you
now
so
as
much
he
for
makes
the
his
super
way to the
sticker,
courthouse. But as you
$5
mentioned,
from
Sam,
Great
moments
Granny
ago,
101.
he and
Thank
his
you
wife
for
are not
being
the
here.
only ones listed in the indictment. You also mentioned his son, 3 other lieutenants. I know we don't know much, but what are we learning about their status when it comes to this criminal case?
Sure. So with respect to his wife, she was not listed, Joe, in the superseding indictment that dates back to 2020. This latest indictment, which came again from a federal grand jury in New York, does include Celia Flores. She is charged in the cocaine importation conspiracy side of it, not the narco-terrorism side. But of course, the latest indictment has been updated with more criminal activity in recent years. Similar charges for his son, for the other 3 lieutenants as well, all of it related to the trafficking of drugs and coordination with these cartels and narco-terrorist organizations that we were just talking about, in addition to possession of weapons or conspiracy to possess weapons. There's a whole bunch of layers to the indictment, but the top line certainly are Maduro and his wife.
And we'll take a quick look at this article here from the Jerusalem Post. Isn't that interesting? Orthodox Jewish judge to preside over Maduro's criminal proceedings in New York. Judge Alvin Hellerstein, a 92-year-old Orthodox Jewish federal judge. I don't see what that has anything to do with it. Serving active, the longest serving active federal judge in the country. Following Nicolás Maduro's arrest on Saturday, Judge Alvin Hellerstein, a 92-year-old Orthodox Jewish federal judge, was appointed to preside over the criminal proceedings against the former Venezuelan president. The trial will take place at the Southern District of New York Courthouse in Manhattan, widely regarded as one of the most powerful and influential courts in the United States, which routinely handles cases involving national security, terrorism, and large-scale international crime. Hellerstein is among the longest-serving active federal judges in the country, appointed to the bench in 1998 by President Bill Clinton. He assumed senior judge status in 2011, but has continued to hear cases well into his 10th decade.
About to arrive where you are at the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Sam, walk us through a little bit about what we expect today in terms of how long something like this is going to take. What happens after for Maduro and his wife, where they'll head, where they're going to be continuing to be held.
Headlines just in itself.
It's a great question. This could be a very sort of quick, perfunctory hearing, although one would imagine, given the complexity that's involved here, it may not be. Again, wow, just a surreal scene as you're watching his armored car right now and a police escort arrive at the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, literally as we are talking right now. Savannah, to your question in terms of where Maduro and his wife have been detained, it's MDC, it's the Metropolitan Detention Center that's located in Brooklyn. It's only about a 15 or 20-minute drive from where we are in Lower Manhattan. This is the same facility where
there have been plenty of people online who have gotten visits from the Secret Service for even suggesting any harm to any American president. Just be mindful of that as you make stupid comments like that. It's just gonna get brought down by us.
Gioni is currently being detained as he awaits trial. Sean Diddy Combs, Ghislaine Maxwell, several other high-profile defendants have also been there. It's frankly a notorious institution in the sense that there have been so many accounts of violence there, of inhumane conditions. That's where Maduro is, where Cecilia Flores have been detained in these early hours here. And again, you are watching in real time right now as the armored truck that has both of them inside is now preparing to take them from the truck inside the building. We're going to lose our vision here any second now, and to process those two.
And there he goes.
Expected to take several hours. There's no indication that NBC News has at this point that the other members of that indictment, other people indicted, are actually going to be in court today.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated. We're going to go outside the courthouse.
Another image that we have here, trying to see, I do believe that could be Nicolás Maduro that you see being led back there, but we're not entirely sure. This camera is really far, so we're just going to keep this live image up here on your screen.
There you go.
But there you can see that military members, law enforcement agents are directing what looks to be ousted Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. Yes, he is on his way there to the New York City courtroom, and that does appear to be him. He is going to be lifted into that helicopter that is there stationed at the prison, where he will be appearing before a judge at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is noon today. Cameras are not allowed inside the courtroom, but as you just saw, reporters are there standing by to let us know what happened inside. Now, before his capture, Maduro and his allies claimed U.S. hostility was motivated by lust for Venezuela's rich oil and mineral resources. This I'm also attributing to some reporting courtesy of the Associated Press. The U.S. seized Maduro and his wife in a military operation on Saturday, capturing them in their home on a military base. President Trump said the U.S. would, quote, run Venezuela temporarily, but Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Sunday that it would not govern the country day to day other than enforcing an existing oil quarantine. I'm going to keep this live image here on your screen because we don't want to miss a moment, at least until the helicopter takes off.
This is from earlier, the transportation of Nicolás Maduro and his wife. Boy, that must have been a fun helicopter ride for him with his
escorted by several agents there just outside of the Brooklyn Detention Center. President Trump, meantime, speaking aboard Air Force One just yesterday, called on Colombia's President Gustavo Petro to stop making cocaine and selling it to the United States. relevant here because the president not just focused on Venezuela at this moment, but also focused on several other Latin American countries there that he says are posing harm to the United States. He called on Venezuela also to provide total access to the country or else face consequences. Now, the 25-page indictment that Maduro is facing was made public on Saturday, and it accuses the ousted Venezuelan leader and others of working with drug cartels to facilitate the shipment of thousands of tons of cocaine into the U.S. They could face life in prison if convicted.
Could face life in prison if convicted. I think they're going to get the Noriega treatment. Let's head back over to the United Nations Emergency Security Council meeting. Let's hear from Cuba.
I now give the floor to the representative of Cuba.
This guy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Cuba aligns itself with the statement to be delivered by Eritrea on behalf of the group of friends of the United Nations and Uganda on behalf of the non-aligned movement. Since September of last year, Cuba has been denouncing the hegemonic of the United States and its aggressive projection against Venezuela and the region. We have clearly been exposed to the serious and unpredictable consequences of the irresponsible conduct of the U.S. government for the political, social, and economic stability of Latin America and the Caribbean, and more generally, for international peace and stability. On the 23rd of December, in this very body, we set out the sequence and escalation of actions carried out by the United States with the aim of overthrowing by force the legitimate and constitutional government of Venezuela and destroying the civic military union. The United States resorted to various maneuvers to materialize its plans for domination, including vile extrajudicial executions and acts of piracy, maritime terrorism against oil tankers and their crews in international waters of the Caribbean Sea, as well as the imposition of an illegal naval blockade against Venezuela and the politically
Nobody was illegally kidnapped. He was arrested.
Government as a foreign terrorist organization.
It just happened to be that Delta Force did it.
To prolonged
Who better?
unilateral coercive measures, economic asphyxiation, smear campaigns, and attacks against some of its important institutions, exposing it to a cruel psychological war, with absolute disrespect for the Charter of the United Nations
And quite honestly, the only reason that Nicolás Maduro is breathing right now is because of the tactical acumen and the expertise of the Delta Force.
Resolutions adopted by this Council and by the General Assembly. On January the 3rd, United States military forces attacked Venezuela with total brutality and treachery, and in an unacceptable and barbaric act kidnapped its legitimate president, Nicolás Maduro, and his companion, Cilia Flores. Cuba condemns in the strongest terms the military aggression of the United States against Venezuela, while categorically reiterating its absolute support and solidarity with the Venezuelan people, and joins the demand that the government of the United States release the constitutional president, Nicolás Maduro Moros, and his companion, Cilia Flores. In the criminal attack perpetrated by the United States, 32 Cubans lost their lives in combat actions. They were carrying out missions on behalf of the Revolutionary Armed Forces and the Ministry of the Interior at the request of counterpart bodies of that country. Our compatriots honorably fulfilled their duty and fell after fierce resistance in direct combat against the attackers or as a result of the bombings of the facilities. Through their heroic actions, they upheld the solidarity sentiments of millions of our compatriots. Mr. President, the cowardly U.S. aggression against Venezuela is a criminal act in violation of international law and the UN Charter. It constitutes a dangerous escalation of the sustained war campaign waged for years by the United States against that sister nation, which intensified since September 2025 with the aggressive naval deployment in the Caribbean Sea under mendacious pretexts and unfounded accusations without any evidence whatsoever. The U.S. military attack against Venezuela has no justification whatsoever. It does not respond to any provocation, nor does it possess legitimacy. It is based on the aberrant doctrine of peace through force and undermines the stability and peace that have characterized our Latin American and Caribbean region for years. It seeks to promote a change in the constitutional order of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, freely chosen by its people. Its ultimate objective is not the false narrative of combating drug trafficking, but control over Venezuela's land and natural resources, as has been openly and shamelessly declared by President Trump and his Secretary of State. This is an imperialist and fascist aggression with objectives of domination that seeks to revive the U.S. hegemonic ambitions over our America, anchored in the outdated Monroe Doctrine. It also seeks to intimidate and subjugate the governments of Latin America and the Caribbean. Cuba calls for an urgent reaction from the international community against this criminal attack on Venezuela, a peaceful nation that does not attack the United States or any other country. We call on all governments, parliaments, social movements, and peoples of the world to condemn the U.S. military aggression against Venezuela and to confront this act of state terrorism that threatens international peace and security and seeks to impose a new doctrine of U.S. imperialist domination in Latin America and the Caribbean and in the world. Mr. President, the recent statements about imperialist plans to steer Venezuela toward a supposed safe, appropriate and prudent transition are totally unacceptable. In the U.S. vision of domination, this means imposing a puppet government functional to its predatory goals, particularly unrestricted access to and plundering of natural resources.
Cuban representative just say something about a puppet government? Wow.
Determining the destiny of
He's got cojones.
Exclusive right of its people without external interference. If the U.S. government, lacking any moral authority whatsoever, truly cared about the peace, freedom and justice of Venezuelan men and women, it would not have
hit that like button. Give me a double boop on your devices. Double boop.
Sovereignty and territorial integrity of that nation. I conclude by reaffirming our unwavering adherence to the proclamation of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace, and by calling for action with the firmness and determination that current circumstances demand, always in defense of international law and of a future of peace for all the peoples of our America and of the world. Thank you.
And that was the message from the Cuban UN representative. Let's go outside the courthouse. There are protests happening in Manhattan as well.
Hallie, you know, it's not surprising given all the circumstances that we saw play out on Saturday of how he was extracted. But I think it's where this is going next in terms of the legal battles ahead, which I mentioned will be quite lengthy. But we do expect, at least according to the judge here, that they will be back in court on March 17th at 11 a.m. there in New York, Hallie.
I want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander. As we've noted here,
All right,
Peter,
so March 17th is going to be the next court date.
The world has been watching what has unfolded here in court, listening to what Maduro and his wife have been talking about, and President Trump, White House officials keyed in on this as well.
I think that's right, Hallie. In many ways, you know, this is bringing the world stage to an American courtroom. The world is watching, even if they're listening. In fact, since they can't see it for themselves, what is happening behind those doors here in Lower Manhattan at this time. No indication yet whether the president himself has been watching this play out or getting updates from his staff here with the White House, but we know the televisions inside the West Wing were tuned in to this over the course of the day. A couple things I want to pick up on. First, what we heard from Maduro that Laura just noted, that in effect he said that this was a military abduction. That reflects language not too dissimilar from what Delcy Rodriguez herself said, the interim, the acting president of that country, the Maduro loyalist who had served as vice president beneath Maduro immediately after he was captured, saying that it was an illegal kidnapping, saying there was only one president in that country. We heard from President Trump
who was particularly fierce in his language, speaking about Rodriguez, saying in effect that unless she gives the United States total access and meets America's demands right now, that she will face a situation, a resolution that is even more harsh than that Maduro had seen so far. Rodriguez, notably a bit more diplomatic, softer in her tone late yesterday, saying that she and the Venezuelan people deserve peace and dialogue, not war. And it really underscores this unique challenge that the president is facing right now. In many ways, what's happened so far was the easy part, in spite of it being a stunning, surprise, daring raid that happened before dawn on Saturday. The real challenge for the president right now, in many ways, is what he faces ahead, transforming Venezuela, which he has described as a mess, as a broken country, into a stable, functioning one. Overnight, he repeated his assertion that we are in charge, that the U.S. is in charge right now, while noting among his immediate priorities sending in American oil companies to take over Venezuela's oil supply and repair the infrastructure there. As he has said, we are running the country. We heard from Marco Rubio just yesterday, speaking to my colleague Kristen Welker on Meet the Press, that we're not running the country, we're running it in terms of its policy. But the president, when he had an opportunity to clarify later, said, I know it's controversial, basically, but we are in charge. As I've been speaking to senior officials here at the White House, they say that the U.S. is in charge, but it's not literally running the country. In fact, the U.S. is basically exerting maximum leverage or pressure on Venezuela and its leadership right now as it relates to oil, demanding that Venezuela basically bow to the president's demands.
Peter, thanks. I'm going to ask you to stand by, as we have now learned that obviously Nicolás Maduro and his wife are out of the courtroom. They are departing court any second now. We do expect, just to give you a sense, we do expect to have a live look at that. And remember why that is interesting here. Earlier in the morning, just after sunrise, we saw Maduro being transported from that facility.
And as you can hear, breaking news right here, Maduro leaving the courthouse. They have had their arraignment. Let's get this to 300 likes, guys. Hit that like button.
Been spending obviously the last day and a half behind bars to court. He'll be taken back there. And in those images, Maduro clearly aware of the optics, clearly aware of the cameras flashing that thumbs up to the rest of the world here. And you heard him in court sounding that same defiant tone. I want to bring in Tom Winter as we're waiting for that live shot to come up. The second we get it, you will see it right here. And Tom, when you talk about the legal proceedings set to move forward, part of this is going to involve classified information, presumably, given the nature and the scope of the indictment against Maduro and his wife.
Yes, and we know that, Hallie, because the federal prosecutors have to tell the court that they intend to use classified information and that they need to bring in the attorneys in this case to get them to sign documents, make sure they're cleared to receive that information, and also make a promise that they're not going to make that information public in the course of their filings or so to do it under seal. That's something that has already taken place in this case. As we mentioned before, this proceeding began earlier today, that in fact there had been a prosecution going back to 2011. And I want people to think about this as we wait for our colleague Sam Brock to get mic'd up, because we did see him leaving the courtroom. It's a trip I've taken too many times before. But basically, in this case, if you want to think of the cartel of the Suns here, this is this group that federal prosecutors say is responsible for using violence, using money, using illegal means to get the drugs out of Colombia and other places in South America through Venezuela. That's why they say we're here in the first place. If you want to equate that to the American mob, that's effectively what the Maduros have been charged with here, is basically being at the top of that, if you will. That's the allegation, that they received compensation and money and were involved in corruption in order to let these drugs go through. But a part of that will no doubt be intercepts that the U.S. has of conversations, discussions that have occurred, basically their ability to electronically eavesdrop in order to help make these cases. That's how a lot of these drug cases are put together. This was a case that was put together by the DEA well over a decade in coming up with it, and then was charged, Maduro specifically, back in March of 2020. At the time, Bill Barr pushing this case forward. It was definitely a topic of discussion in the Trump administration leading up to the COVID-19 shutdown back then.
So that's how this case came together. That's some of the conduct that's been alleged here. And now this scene that we're looking at outside of the courthouse, where we'll see Sam Brock shortly, you've got people that are obviously very happy with what has occurred here and the arrest of Maduro and his wife. You've got a number of individuals who are not happy with this and the U.S. efforts in Venezuela. The NYPD having to deploy a second ring of barricades, calling those in because of the size.
I can only imagine what Maduro's wife is saying to him right now.
The crowd outside of the courthouse. They do have a number of different ways to be able to get Maduro and his wife out of there and presumably back to the heliport in Wall Street on a,
walk
good
through
day.
that, Tom.
Yeah,
those steps.
So without going through some things that are there for security, and as somebody who's regularly in that courthouse, frankly, for our own security, there are a number of ways to get somebody out of that courthouse and then out of where this huge crowd is, basically to get them out via vehicle, to be able to get them to the Wall Street heliport if in fact they're going to use a helicopter. And then it's a very short flight. If it takes 60 seconds, I'd be shocked, back to that jail facility.
Tom Winter, thank you. I want to go now to Sam Brock, who was inside that courtroom for those historic moments as Nicolás Maduro and his wife were arraigned on American soil. Sam, tell us what it was like inside that room.
And here we go.
Hallie, one of the most remarkable arraignments you could ever imagine, right? You've covered court cases throughout the course of your career. You're hard-pressed to remember anything like this. So Nicolás Maduro walks into the courtroom with his wife, Celia Flores, right around noon. And immediately, so first of all, he is wearing orange garb from the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, a black shirt over that. Hard to tell, Hallie, whether or not he was handcuffed or not when he first walked in, but he is right away shaking hands with all of his attorneys. He nods at the people in the gallery, both on the side where the public was seated as well as the journalists. It almost looked like at one point he cracked a smile, was greeting his attorneys, getting situated. His wife came in as well, Celia Flores, I might add. It was hard to tell at first, but then this was brought up by their attorneys, had bandages on her face and had bruising around her eyes. They discussed the fact that she was injured during detention and even mentioned possible fractures to her back or other parts of her body when the question around medical attention came up. So we'll get back to that in a second. But when I say remarkable, so they come in, Maduro has 4 U.S. Marshals behind him.
They put her in Gen Pop, did she had bruises?
Sit directly behind Maduro. While he is seated then and facing the judge, Judge Hellerstein addresses the court. He proceeds to read the charges, certainly the narco-terrorism, the cocaine importation conspiracy, the weapons-related charges, gets through all of that, and then says to Nicolás Maduro, "Are you Nicolás Maduro?" And he says, Hallie, first, "I am Nicolás Maduro of Venezuela. I am president of the Republic of Venezuela.
No,
I have been
not.
kidnapped since January 3rd. I was captured at my home in Caracas, Venezuela," which at that point, Hallie, the judge steps in and says, "Wait a minute. We're going to get to all of that. I just want to know if you're Nicolás Maduro."
Interesting.
And he says, "Yes, I am." And in fact, he's wearing headphones the entire time, right? Because he's hearing the interpretation, the translation. He actually interrupts the translator as she's trying to articulate to the judge and to the court what Maduro is saying. He's so eager to sort of state his case. So again, this was very anomalous in terms of what happens in what are normally perfunctory arraignments and hearings. So they go through that. The judge reads through the charges, okay? Then he asks him whether or not he's seen the indictment. And Maduro and his attorney, Barry Pollock, who, by the way, represented Julian Assange, well known in the field of criminal defense. He's also known for negotiating a plea agreement to get Assange out of jail, also represented one of the Enron executives who was fully acquitted on criminal fraud charges. He's representing Maduro in this case, and he said, "I have briefed my client, but he hasn't actually read the indictment." And so then the judge says, do you want the court to read the indictment? Maduro says, "No, I don't," but he does want to have consultation on it. The entire time this is going on, Maduro and Flores are taking just scrupulous notes.
Barry
you
Pollock.
can see their notepads when they stood up at the end of the court proceeding, just filled with information. Maduro wanted to make sure that the court knew those were his notes. He's entitled to them. Am I allowed to keep them? The judge said, "Sure, you can keep the notes." So this all goes on, and then the judge asks Maduro whether or not he has been briefed on his rights, and by rights not just to counsel, but also to silence. And when that exchange goes back and forth again with the translator, he says, "This is the first I've been told of that." It's not clear whether or not Maduro was referring to whether or not he has to speak with police and law enforcement, or whether it was right to counsel, or what aspect of his rights he was just being informed about for the first time. That was a very interesting interaction as well. And of course, the pleas, right? So we get to the pleas. The judge asks Maduro how he pleads to these 4 counts. He says, "Soy inocente. I am innocent. I am not guilty. I am a decent man. At which point the judge again intervenes and says, okay, we were just looking for guilty or not guilty. Not a fuller explanation. Don't worry, there is going to be time for that. Very similar, by the way, with Celia Flores as well. She says, yes, I am Celia Flores, First Lady of the Republic of Venezuela.
Oh,
she acknowledges that she's seen a summary of the indictment,
yes or no,
not
honey?
the actual indictment itself, and goes on and says, you know, we're okay to waive the reading at this time. She planned on getting fully briefed, but he says, you know your rights, and she says, yes, I do. She also says, not guilty, completely innocent, when she is asked whether or not she is guilty of those crimes. The narco-terrorism is just for Maduro, but the other 3 counts do apply to Celia Flores. So this is all transpiring, Hallie, you know, and then we find out, you know, they have a right to consular notification.
That's right.
And they are both interested, both Maduro and his wife, in speaking with someone from a consular figure from their own government to get more information. Absolutely interested in that. And then one of the most bizarre things happens at the very end of this very brief arraignment. It was, what, 30 minutes or so. Maduro turns around, waves to the crowd. Not clear if he's waving at someone in particular or just in general, but a man stands up, and I want to quote this directly to you so I don't get it wrong. He says, you will pay on behalf of Venezuela. And Maduro says, in the name of God, I will be free. This is all happening at an arraignment in front of dozens of people, right?
Crazy.
I mean, we just know this is not normal playbook legal sort of stuff. So
Not at
all
all.
of that,
Sam,
I would just raise one other thing, and I'm sure you'll have some follow-ups here. If I may just raise one other point, which is that Barry Pollack, the attorney for Maduro, said that I absolutely plan on filing motions regarding the legality or illegality, and he used the word of Maduro's abduction, and also pointed out that he is a head of state and afforded certain rights of immunity. So expect in the days and months to come, those motions will be forthcoming. But they're not right now. Next steps in this, March 17th is 60 days from now. That's the next court hearing that's scheduled at the moment with Judge Hellerstein, and that's about discovery and sharing information that the prosecution has with Maduro and his legal team and Flores and her legal team. But just an extraordinary 30 minutes in U.S. federal court that just transpired.
Sounds like it was popping
Sam,
off
a
in the
stunning
courtroom.
play-by-play from you. I want you to have some
Outstanding.
follow-ups for you, but I want to explain to people what they're seeing here. This is a live shot from above. We expect Nicolás Maduro and his wife to leave court. They will be transported back to that facility where they will be held behind bars for the remainder of these court proceedings. Sam, let me ask you about this outburst in court. Again, not something we typically see, as we have said so often over the course of the last couple of days here. Do we know who the person was that stood up and, it sounds like, Sam, yelled at Nicolás Maduro?
He did. He did. I wouldn't say he yelled. He just said, matter-of-factly, you will pay. The court officer there immediately pointed at the man and told him to stop talking. And I did see probably 2 minutes later, once the arraignment was over and everyone was preparing to leave the courtroom, he was apprehended by officials and taken away.
Oops.
What the consequences will be, not quite clear. But as we have this conversation about someone standing up in the face of Maduro, I will tell you, at 500 Pearl Street, where we are right now, the site of many a protest, there's dozens of people right now with Venezuelan flags that are happy and cheering the end of Maduro as the leader of Venezuela and calling for his justice, while just across basically a divide, there's a whole group of other individuals that are concerned with the manner in which the U.S. carried out this military action, and they're saying that it's illegal. So you have sort of these conflicting viewpoints on the doorsteps of the federal courthouse as this man, who to this point is unidentified, stands up solely, no one else was standing, and looks right at Maduro as he's waving and says, you will pay for this.
It sounds as though, Sam, that Maduro had a degree of command in the room, the ability to make those remarks about his character and about his innocence to the judge. Sometimes in these arraignments, we hear just a single word or two from the defendant. That was not the case here. Maduro addressing the person who stood up in court and addressed him. Was that your sense of how the proceedings went?
1,000%. And I will tell you, for Venezuelans who have lived under this regime, they're familiar with his showmanship. Talked about Peter Alexander this morning, the dancing on stage that the U.S. government in the recent weeks interpreted as some sort of act of defiance. Well, this is someone that clearly felt like a showman when he walked into the room, which I think was what was most striking to many of us. I mean, here he is walking in under the custody of U.S. Marshals, and he's nodding to everybody there, even kind of cracking a smile, waving as he leaves the courtroom. It was almost like he felt like he had a command of what's going on. Obviously, this is someone who's been the president of a country for the last 10 plus years, but he was literally interrupting the translator when she was trying to translate what he was saying and continuing this commentary with the judge when the judge was only looking for, 1 or 2 word answers. Now, obviously, he probably didn't understand the exact protocols of the U.S. legal system, but it was incredible to see just the presence that he had in that courtroom, that he felt comfortable enough to act as if he was running the show, not necessarily, the judge and the justice officials.
Maduro, it seemed at points, Sam, acknowledged that he didn't have command of the U.S. justice system. At one point saying to the judge, I didn't know I had some of those rights, more or less, as we are seeing now some of the movement now from outside court. Sam, stick with me because I have to ask, you mentioned seeing visible bandages and what appeared to be bruising on Celia Flores. Any visible sign of injury on Nicolás Maduro?
No, none. His physical stature is just so tall. He was taller than the other
now
4
let's
people.
See if they can get him safely back to the chopper, headed back to Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn.
That brought him
live
into the room.
in New York City.
He was erect. He felt, very energetic. He didn't seem like someone who had been injured. I mean, obviously, we've been documenting the fact that Maduro keeps showing thumbs up every time he is in front of a camera, whether that's at, the DAA processing department in Chelsea, or it's underneath, the chopper as he's getting onto a helicopter at a helipad. He seems to be very much projecting this image of power. He did not seem injured. His gait was normal, but it was surprising for sure, once you really started to pay attention to it, to see exactly what Celia Flores' face looked like. I mean, there were clearly bandages.
Maduro is Oscar Mike.
There, obvious bruising, and I have a feeling that that's going to be brought up front and center here before too long.
Heading back
Sam, stand
to
by
jail.
for 1 minute because we are seeing now this movement here in Manhattan, in New York City, what appears to be Maduro leaving court. Let me bring in Tom Winter, who has tracked movements like these countless times over the years. Where does Maduro head next? Where does Celia Flores head next?
Right, so they're coming out of what's called as Park Row after 9/11, how this whole area was sealed and locked down. After coming out of that federal courthouse, the green vehicle there is known as a Bearcat. That's a heavily armored vehicle, and the NYPD Highway Patrol now in the lead. This is also next to their headquarters. So this area is always generally very secure in Lower Manhattan. They've obviously got what's called a route set up. You'll see the police officers blocking traffic, so they will now be able to quickly take him. I have not received any reports that the Brooklyn Bridge has been shut down, so it looks like they'll probably get him back to the Wall Street heliport. This whole thing should take only several minutes at this point because they can block this off easily, and they've done this many times before. The reason for this, I know folks are going to look at it and say, look, this is an enormous amount of taxpayer dollars, and it is, that's being used to do this. It's just that in order to get him safely there without having an incident and disrupting this whole judicial process, having any civilians injured, any members of the public, they want to be able to get him to a spot where they can just fly him to Brooklyn. You might remember in previous high-profile proceedings, I'm thinking of El Chapo, when he was tried in New York. In other cases, they want to make sure that there's no members of the public that are injured. And to do that, they'd have to shut down the Brooklyn Bridge or other major arteries in New York City. And that's just something that becomes untenable. So it's easier to fly them.
And let me know in the chat where you're viewing from.
And all indications are at this point, we'll know fairly shortly here, because they have an opportunity either to get on the bridge or to get to the heliport. They will likely go to the heliport. This is right behind the entrance to NYPD's headquarters, as well as the federal courts downtown. And this is going to be an effort by the marshals, by the DEA, in order to get him there. And at this point, it looks like they are making the turn to get down to the heliport. That's at least where it looks like to me where they're going to head.
And that is presumably, Tom, where we will see another image of Maduro in person being walked back into the helicopter. We saw the earlier one just after sunrise, very early this morning, as Maduro was being taken out. Again, aware of the camera angles, candidly, aware of his visibility, aware that he was being watched by people around the world. And I want to bring back in Sam Brock to the conversation because, Sam, I understand that in just the last maybe 2-3 minutes here, we have heard now from Maduro's defense attorney for the first time outside court.
Yeah, so Jonathan Dean, star colleague at WNBC, apparently just spoke with Barry Pollock outside of court and asked him about comments that were asserted that he was abducted when Maduro said he was abducted by the U.S. government. And Pollock said something to the effect, and I'm paraphrasing here, of what Mr. Maduro said in court speaks for itself. And that is part of the conversation that's going to be ensuing here in the coming weeks and months, Ali, is the idea of using force in an international relations capacity like that, which is explicitly prohibited unless it's in defense of a country or it's sanctioned by the United Nations. And so what he meant in terms of the use of the word abduction is not clear. Maduro, well, at least it's clear enough that Maduro said he felt like he was kidnapped. Pollock used the word abduction, and he said it's complicated, it's voluminous in terms of the motions that we're going to be filing, but you can expect that that's where we will be taking this case next. Once they resume on March 17th, again, that's to reconnect and to be able to share and update the judge on where they are in terms of sharing documents and discovery. But it was striking to hear Pollock say what he said in court. His client speaks for itself.
Let me go to Laura Jarrett, our senior legal correspondent. And Laura, the semantics matter when it comes to the legal proceedings here. The fact that Maduro used the word, as Sam is talking about, used the language kidnapped, his attorney talking about abduction, that's significant.
It's significant, not surprising, given his position on this, Hallie. But while he may feel it was a kidnapping or an abduction or the like, with some signal of something being unjustified, his attorney is still going to be under the burden to convince a judge down the line, which it sounds like he'll want to do, that his detention is not legally justified, right? And so there will be a number of different arguments to marshal in their favor on that. But this isn't a case that is as if it's routine in any sense of the word, or that this is happening all the time. And so they're going to have to, do what they can to marshal arguments without the benefit of a ton of precedent for similar circumstances. I can't really think of a similar situation. We've talked about
no sleep till Brooklyn.
Noriega in the past, but it's not as if this is happening on a routine basis so that they'll be able to marshal a bunch of cases in their favor. The Justice Department, on the other hand, has an enormous interest in this case and seeing him put away for a long time. As we've talked about, he was charged back in 2020. They didn't, by any stretch, do anything like this. They didn't make any attempt, at least as far as we know, reporting has shown, to manage to extract him back then, probably believing that they couldn't. And so now they're going to be working tooth and nail to try to keep him behind bars. But it will be up to that judge to decide down the line, imagining in months from now, whether or not his detention and his arrest was valid, whether or not his rights were valid or were violated in some way. And then, Hallie, of course, there will be appeal after appeal. And so I think, for people who are watching this all play out, during that time, unless his lawyers can figure out a way to get him out, he is going to be behind those bars in Brooklyn, and it is not a pleasant place. This is a place that's been subject to lawsuit after lawsuit for the conditions in there. It is going to be a far cry from the kinds of places that he's been enjoying up until this point.
And you are seeing now those images from earlier today, Maduro leaving that Brooklyn facility, flashing that thumbs up, and of course those images there of the military operation overnight. There it is again as we are watching. And just to give you a sense, listen, our helicopter's in the air with our NBC News New York station there. We are tracking the movements of Maduro and his wife as they are being transported here. Let me bring in Richard Engel, because as this is happening, Richard, on the ground for us in the region in Colombia, we have heard Maduro now in court insist he is the president of Venezuela, and similar emphasis from his son, who is speaking at almost the same time that his father was in court to the Venezuelan National Assembly, saying his father is the rightful leader of that country.
He is, and I think it's fair to say that all across Latin America right now, people are watching this. This is designed to send a message, as you've said, and all of your guests have said, and all of the reporting that has been done. This is not just another typical court case. A head of state was taken by U.S. Special Forces.
So breaking news, Maduro pleads not guilty.
Brought to the United States to face trial. He's now professing his innocence. Some of the imagery here is clearly designed to send fear to the United States opponents in the region, designed to send fear to the leaders of Cuba, designed to send fear to the leader of Colombia, the president of Colombia. President Trump has mentioned them specifically. He said that the president of Colombia better watch his backside, and that the Cubans may be on their last legs, the Cuban regime. So this is a show of force, an intimidating show of force. But you mentioned also several times that this is completely unprecedented. This is unprecedented, but it is it is reminding me of something that I witnessed about 20 years ago. I was standing exactly where, or in the same situation where Sam Brock was right now, and he did an amazing job giving us the play-by-play of what had happened inside that courtroom. I was in a similar courtroom in Iraq when the dictator of that country was brought in
Let's jump right to this article real quick from the Wall Street Journal. Maduro to be represented by Julian Assange lawyer Barry Pollock. Barry Pollock, a high-profile defense lawyer who previously represented WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, is defending Nicolás Maduro according to a notice of appearance entered with the court. And that is what's going on with his representation.
And he said almost word for word what Nicolás Maduro said today. He said that he is the president of Iraq, that this is illegitimate, that none of this should apply to him. He asked questions. The judge tried to say this is just an arraignment. We just want your name. He started to present his defense. He was stopped from doing that. Almost exactly the same as what we're seeing right now. Ultimately, Saddam Hussein was hanged for war crimes. But his defense team was making this same argument, and he was making the same argument. And he was also trying to flash a smile. I was in the courtroom. He was giving thumbs up. He was trying to show that he was very much in command. So we have been down this road at least one time before in quite a unique historic parallel.
Our Richard Engel on the ground in the region in Colombia. It is just after 1 o'clock here on the East Coast.
He is the
10
chief
in the West, and you are
for NBC News.
Looking live now at some of these images from New York City as Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro and his wife Celia Flores are on their way back to a detention facility after their arraignment in U.S. federal court just minutes ago. Both of them pleading not guilty to those federal charges of drug trafficking conspiracy, with Maduro saying, "I am president of the Republic of Venezuela." He says, "I am here kidnapped since Saturday." You see his quote here, saying he was captured at his home in Caracas, Venezuela. Obviously, that was the military operation, large scale, by the United States, late Friday into Saturday morning, in which Maduro and Flores were extracted to the United States, flown back to New York, where they have been in that detention facility for the course of the last 48 hours. I want to bring in now Ana Vanessa Herrero, a freelance reporter who is in Caracas. She has been reporting on the ground from inside Venezuela for us. Ana, the last 2-3 hours, what has it been like where you are?
Well, believe it or not, I was expecting, when I imagined this moment, I was expecting people on the streets, people.
And we're going to switch over the coverage right now. We're going to switch over here. And let's hear another angle.
New York, and then placed at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. Maduro and his wife pleading not guilty. So we do see that the camera is now panning, and it's a little unclear as to exactly what the camera is going to be panning to, whether that is the, we do see that there's a police car with flashing lights. It does look like perhaps this might be the motorcade that is carrying Maduro and his wife. So we're just going to stay on this live look, as it does see that some of the traffic there is at a standstill to allow for this transportation to happen. And we do see also maybe another vantage point right here. I'm going to pull up this live look. This is just another angle for you, as we do see this here also in New York. So we're going to continue to monitor all of these live looks. What we're going to do for now, though, is we are just going to step away for a brief break as we anticipate perhaps the arrival of Maduro and his wife, although we don't see that armored vehicle that we were watching live from the helicopter as it was on its way. So for now, we're going to just step away.
And they're going to take a quick break.
I will say there certainly seems to be some of that here in terms of just the crowds that have shown up in front of the courthouse, but also, honestly, this acrimony between those who are protesting right now against the idea the U.S. had no right
waiting on the armed motorcade to get him back to Brooklyn.
do this, to invade a sovereign nation and to take its leader
Welcome,
and bring
everybody.
him back
Welcome.
to the
Come
United
in,
States
come
and
in.
U.S.
Hit that
soil
like button.
to face justice
Subscribe
versus
and
those
share.
who are just so elated at the idea that
Thank you
someone,
for
and I will
supporting the channel
sort of
and being here.
lay out in the indictment, Maduro is accused of not just coordinating with FARC, right, conspiring with FARC. This was the superseding indictment back in 2020, but also in the last 4 or 5 years, the U.S. government lays out a case where he's working with the Sinaloa cartel, with Tren de Aragua, that you have someone who is
FARC
essentially
is the
running
Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia.
state-sponsored narco-terrorism, and at a time when the 30 million people that live in Venezuela are struggling with rolling blackouts and obtaining basic medical devices and food and water and toilet paper and all the things that we repeatedly report on when there are shortages of in Venezuela, that he was enriching his own pockets and the pockets of his inner circle and the military. And so you are seeing this outpouring of Venezuelan Americans. Certainly that diaspora stretches, I think, as Tom said, from Miami to Madrid, all over the world. We're seeing it here in New York, we're seeing it in Miami, but there is also the realization that there is an intense legal battle that is going to be taking place, and whether or not these motions may be successful on behalf of Maduro's attorneys, that this was an unlawful capture. So all of these different layers of a very complicated subject are all interspersing right now together as we are just watching this extraordinary first arraignment and now visual trip for Maduro and his wife Celia back to MDC, back to the Metropolitan Detention Center.
Sam, thank you. Extraordinary, to say the least, as we're keeping an eye on these live aerial images from our NBC New York station and their chopper. We have heard, as Sam talks about the legal battle, we have now heard from Nicolás Maduro's new defense attorney, Barry Pollock, speaking outside court just minutes ago. I want to play for you what he said. Watch this.
And just in terms of his capture, because you guys did raise the concern regarding what he called a kidnapping.
I think what President Maduro said in court speaks for itself.
And a reminder of what Nicolás Maduro said in court. He said he is a decent man. He said he is the president of Venezuela.
He's not going to say anything.
He was kidnapped from his home in Caracas by the U.S. military. You see it there. I want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander, because Peter now continues the clock for the DOJ to lay out the legal proceedings in the face of the arguments that the defense team will put up.
The president himself howling on that very topic just yesterday, saying that Nicolás Maduro and his wife would face the full might of American justice. We heard initially from the Attorney General Pam Bondi on Saturday, moments after we learned about this capture, the arrest of Maduro.
Here we go. It looks like we're seeing the motorcade here. We'll get back to that shot in just a moment. That may not be the motorcade. We could have seen the rest of it go out. Looks like they have the area closed off, transporting Maduro back to jail.
But this process is going to play out like any other court case would here, but this one, of course, is unique. Still, the Justice Department is putting a lot of resources behind this effort right now, as we've now learned. Likely the next court appearance for Maduro to take place just a couple of months from now. There are a lot of questions to be raised with the Justice Department, with the president himself. He has no public events scheduled for today. But, you know, how does the White House respond to this argument from Maduro and his team that this was a military abduction, that he has been kidnapped? Language that was initially echoed by the now acting, the interim president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, and her comments immediately following the arrest, basically saying that this was an illegal kidnapping, saying that there was only one president of Venezuela, and in fact saying that that remains Nicolás Maduro at this time. A couple things are striking, and Sam made this point earlier, but I think it is worth repeating, which is just the presence that Maduro had, it appears, in that courtroom there. Clearly, he is a very large man, and he is one who for more than 13 years has been on the world stage, succeeding Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. And as a senior White House official said to me, part of that performative nature of his leadership is something that really sort of got underneath the skin of some of those here at the White House, that the members of the inner circle for the president viewed the sort of public displays, the repeated displays of dancing, the rejection of multiple offers for him to surrender as evidence, basically, of not just Maduro's
not guilty to the charges against the Maduro, telling
sweeping
the judge
shots
that,
of
quote,
Lower
I
Manhattan.
am a decent man. So this seems to be the helipad that we might be getting a glimpse of Maduro and, of course, the very heavy law enforcement presence. We do see that traffic is at a standstill right here. And this is an aerial vantage point, so we're just waiting on this. We also have another live look here, and I'm going to pull this one up. This is from the ground, and you can see this vantage point. So we do see the very heavy police motorcade right here, the flashing lights as the motorcade is making its way to the helipad. And I did want to just stay on this. This is something unique. Watching all of this unfold as it happens in real time. Maduro, the deposed Venezuelan president, and his wife, their court proceedings have wrapped up, and now they're headed back to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York. Maduro facing 4 federal charges, including narco.
Maduro facing 4 federal charges, and his wife in the same vehicle.
Narco and drug trafficking. So we are continuing to follow this live look right here from New York, and you can see exit 1, traffic at a standstill to make way for this motorcade as we continue to follow all of this. Now, we are expecting at some point to see Maduro exit and board a helicopter to transport him back to the detention center.
Nicolás Maduro pleads not guilty along with his wife.
We have another vantage point that I'm going to pull in right now just to give you a different perspective. This is from the helicopter's vantage point right here as it is continuing.
Represented by Julian Assange lawyer Barry Pollock.
Right here. We do see a large number of law enforcement vehicles with their lights flashing, pedestrian, civilian traffic being put to the side to allow for the transportation of Maduro and his wife as they are expected to board a helicopter to head back to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York. So a live look there, an aerial view as we continue to follow this. And we are just going to hang on these live looks. We have several different angles for you. It does look like this helicopter now maybe zooming into something else. So let's just take a look at it. So this is just a different perspective. You can see on the right-hand side of your screen, it's a little hard to tell, but it does look like perhaps we are watching that motorcade, and it might be on the upper right-hand side. We do see a lot of flashing lights right here, so we're just going to hang on this. It's a little unclear exactly where that motorcade is. It does look like the helicopter also trying to search for that.
We're going to jump over here for a
play
second.
now, particularly, Hallie, particularly if President Trump, if the Trump administration decides to take future action. And then, of course, we'll watch the MAGA base very closely. Right now, largely unified behind him. But if this drags out, that could change. Hallie.
Kristen Welker, thank you very much for that. Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro and his wife Celia Flores on their way back to that Brooklyn detention facility, capping a stunning 48 hours with their not guilty pleas in U.S. federal court and setting the stage for what is sure to be a bruising legal battle ahead, perhaps a political one for President Trump. That concludes our coverage. We'll return you now to NBC News Daily.
Welcome to NBC News Daily. You have been watching a special report with Hallie Jackson. It is Monday, January 5th.
And we're going to head, obviously, back over here.
Maduro and his wife are
some
en
live
route
video.
back to prison after their court proceedings. They both have pleaded not guilty to the charges against them, maintaining their innocence. And also, both Maduro and his wife
Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe.
That they are the rightful leaders of their country. Maduro saying to the judge, quote, I am a decent man. The president.
Oops. We got a little glitch here. Just as I say, we're
Possibly
professionals.
his wife exit these
That's the way
vehicles
it happened.
and make their way onto a helicopter as
you for your
they will be
patience.
transported back to the detention center. So right now, it's a little hard to tell exactly where that motorcade is. As you can imagine, this is New York City, so a lot of traffic happening right now. The helicopter trying to find perhaps where that motorcade is among these roads right here. And we also have another look. This is from the ground, just to give you a different perspective. Continuing very heavy police presence along this route. So we did want to share that with you here as well. And we do have another look that we wanted to share with you also from the ground. This is just another vantage point. As you can see, this is near exit 1, the Battery Park. So we're going to just continue to share these with you. Now, sometimes these shots do drop out, as you can imagine, but we do have a variety of different perspectives that we are going to continue to dip into should one go out. And, you know, I'm just keeping a very close eye. It does look like the helicopter shot, at least one of them, is now out, but we're going to bring that up as soon as we can. And of course, bring you also continuing reaction from around the world as well. And speaking of reaction, as we do await a look of Maduro, I do want to head to Britain, as the Foreign Minister Yvette Cooper is making a statement on Venezuela.
Oh, good.
And we're just going to pop that up right now as we continue to listen in.
Corrupt links involved Iran, with Hezbollah increasingly present in recent years, as well as malign support from Russia. And a regime which has facilitated illicit finance, sanctions evasion and organised criminal activity, including narcotics trafficking and illegal gold trading. That undermines the security of the whole region, including UK
Sounds like the UK is getting on board.
These territories, as well as the United States and other regional partners. The country has been driven into economic ruin, with an 80% drop in their GDP in a decade. Over 8 million people have left, causing instability elsewhere in the region. And we have seen Maduro's regime systematically dismantle democratic institutions, silencing dissent and weaponizing state resources to maintain power through fear and corruption. The International Criminal Court has opened an investigation into possible crimes against humanity following reports of hundreds of extrajudicial killings.
I mean, he kind of volunteered.
Including at the hands of Venezuela's security services and paramilitary groups under the regime's command. UN investigators have repeatedly reported a pattern of arbitrary detentions, tortures and killings. In July 2024 presidential election, millions of Venezuelans voted, but the official results have never been published. The opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, was banned by Maduro from standing. International observers cited basic failures of election integrity, and independent tallies covering 80% of polling stations showed a clear victory for Edmundo Gonzalez, and yet Maduro claimed victory. And most recently in October, the UN independent fact-finding mission reported on state security forces using firearms against protesters after the elections 18 months ago, where 25 people died. Gonzalez has been forced to leave the country and claim political asylum in Spain. Machado was forced into hiding for her own safety and had to be spirited out of the country to receive her Nobel Peace Prize in Norway last month. These are the hallmarks of a regime that clings to power through fear, coercion and violence, not through democratic consent. And that is why, as the Prime Minister said on Saturday, we can shed no tears for the end of Maduro's rule.
There you go.
Let me turn to UK policy. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK has long been an advocate for a democratic Venezuela and a vocal critic of the Maduro regime. Since 2019, successive UK governments have refused to recognise the regime. Through the G7, the UN, with partners and directly, we have continued to call out the Maduro regime and its appalling human rights violations. We have also, in some areas, taken a different policy approach to some of our allies. Our other Five Eyes partners have closed their embassies, but we have maintained our diplomatic mission in Caracas at a much more senior level than many of our partners, and seeking dialogue, sustaining direct contact with the opposition, supporting Venezuelan civil society, and advocating for British interests. A year ago, around Maduro's inauguration, the UK acted alongside partners and announced a wave of new sanctions. We targeted 15 individuals, including judges, senior ranking officials in Maduro's regime, responsible for undermining democracy, the rule of law and human rights violations. And we have imposed sanctions on individuals, but not on sectors of the economy. And we have not supported or been involved in blockades or strikes against drug boats. We have continued to directly promote the interests of the British Overseas Territories, who need to see stability in the region. And of course, throughout, we have promoted and maintained support for international law. Commitment to international law, as the Prime Minister set out on Saturday, is immensely important to this government. Those principles guide the decisions that we make and the actions we take as part of Britain's foreign policy. That commitment to international law is part of our values, is also strongly in the UK's national interest. And our manifesto talked about a foreign policy that is progressive and that is also realistic, engaging with the world as we find it in the interest of UK security, prosperity and our values. That means upholding international law and defending democracy, and it means confronting the complex, evolving and hybrid threats that we and our allies face in the world today. And those principles and values also guide the conversations that we have with our allies across a range of issues where we agree and disagree. And in my discussions with Secretary Rubio, I raised the importance of complying with international law.
Lexi Law Nerd says UK covering their butts, too late.
And we will continue to urge all partners to do so at every stage. It is, of course, for the US to set
Buddy
out...
Boy 1984, thank goodness for the UK and their ability to put things into very concise black and white terms. Facts matter.
The legal basis for their actions, and the UN Security Council is discussing Venezuela this afternoon. These issues will continue to be matters for international discussion. I discussed with Secretary Rubio what should happen next, and our continued commitment to a transition.
She did get a phone call.
To a peaceful and stable democracy. Our collective immediate focus must be on avoiding any deterioration in Venezuela into further instability, criminality, repression or violence. That would be deeply damaging for the people of Venezuela, our own overseas territories, our allies, and in the US and other regional partners. The UK has long been clear that the leadership of Venezuela must reflect the will of the Venezuelan people. So the international community must come together to help achieve a peaceful transition to a democratic government that respects the rights and will of its people. That must mean action on the economic crisis, the release of political prisoners, the return of opposition politicians, an end to political repression, respect for human rights, and plans for the holding of free and fair elections. And I urge the acting President, Delcy Rodriguez, to take these steps forward because the people of Venezuela have a right to decide their own future. The US Secretary of State and I discussed the particular role that the UK can play to support a peaceful democratic transition and stability. Because drawing on our embassy in Caracas and on the work that we have done over many years to build up relationships and dialogue with Venezuelan
This guy with his arms folded up here, he's not on board. Everybody else seems to be.
Opposition parties and with the current authorities and regime, and of course, our relationship with the US. To that end, I have also spoken today with Venezuelan opposition leader Marina Corina Machado, and her unwavering fight for democracy, human rights and the rule of law in Venezuela and against oppression is inspirational, and we will keep in touch over the days and weeks ahead. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me turn briefly to another matter. The House will have seen recent comments from the United States and from Denmark regarding Greenland. Let me be very clear on the UK position. Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Our close European partners, our long-standing NATO allies, and all our countries work closely together on security issues and will always do so. The future of Greenland is a matter for the Greenlanders and Danes and no one else. I commend this statement to the House.
We were listening there to British Foreign Minister Cooper on Venezuela and also some brief statements on Greenland as we are taking a live aerial view as the motorcade transporting Maduro and his wife are now right now on this leg of the journey after they appeared in court pleading not guilty to all charges against them. We are going to continue to follow this and, of course, bring you any live looks of Maduro as he is now headed back to Brooklyn, where he is being housed in the Metropolitan Detention Center. I'm Stephanie Quinn. You are watching live now from Fox. We're going to step away for a break, and after
she's going to take a little break, but we are going to go live to the protests outside of the courthouse, live in Manhattan. Today, Nicolás Maduro and his wife pleading not guilty. And these are some of the protests happening outside of the federal courthouse. Let's head back to the UN Emergency Security Meeting. And this is Spain checking in.
En el día de hoy, España expresa su profunda preocupación por lo ocurrido en Venezuela, que, como ha señalado el
Secretary General of the United Nations has noted, it constitutes a very worrying precedent with implications for the region and for the world. Respect for the principles of the Charter of the United Nations, particularly the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states and the prohibition of the use or the threat of use of force, is indispensable to ensure international coexistence.
España defiende la vigencia de un orden internacional basado en reglas, donde resulta imperativo apostar, como recoge el artículo 2.3 de la Carta, por el arreglo pacífico de las controversias. Consideramos que estas acciones constituyen un precedente muy preocupante para la paz y la seguridad regional, y recordamos que los recursos naturales del país son parte de su soberanía. Compartimos que la lucha contra el crimen organizado en la región es una prioridad, pero esa lucha solo puede hacerse mediante la cooperación internacional. Compartimos también que es prioritario defender los derechos humanos y las libertades públicas en Venezuela. España quiere trabajar por la paz, la estabilidad, la democracia, el progreso y la justicia social. Y eso no puede venir impuesto por la fuerza. Eso solo puede venir a través de un diálogo extenso entre venezolanos, con una solución venezolana pacífica y democrática, que sea la voz del pueblo venezolano la que marque el destino de Venezuela. España no reconoció el resultado de las últimas elecciones celebradas en Venezuela en julio de 2024 y ha sido contundente su condena de cualquier violación y amenaza a los derechos humanos. Ha dado protección a aquellos líderes opositores que han sido perseguidos y ha mostrado un firme rechazo a cualquier conducta antidemocrática y abuso contra la ciudadanía. Pero esta condena solo puede ejercerse desde el respeto a la legalidad internacional. España trabajará por unir a los venezolanos
unite Venezuelans,
y apuesta por el diálogo y la paz,
and is committed to dialogue and peace because force never brings more democracy. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Spain, and I now give the floor to the representative of South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. President. We wish to congratulate the Federal Republic of Somalia for assuming the rotating presidency of the United Nations Security Council for the month of January, and wish you and your delegation all the best in the execution of your responsibilities. We also wish to thank you for convening this debate and affording all UN member states to participate, because the situation
and we are keeping a close eye on the transportation of Nicolás Maduro back to jail.
Mr. President, integral to the maintenance of international peace and security,
this is not a war.
The establishment of the United
This was
Nations
an arrest.
Is the understanding
apprehension.
That no nation can claim to be legally or
tactical apprehension
superior to another. We are all nations born out of different histories and contexts, ascribing to the common values and principles enshrined.
And let me just check the temperature here. Put a 1 in the chat if you think he was arrested. Put a 2 in the chat if you think he was kidnapped. Let's see what's going on.
In the Charter of the United Nations. Chief, amongst these principles.
1 in the chat if he was arrested. 2 in the chat if he was kidnapped.
Is the sovereign equality.
Want to hear
of
your
all its
opinion.
Members. By signing the Charter, we have all committed to settle our international disputes by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace, security, and justice are not endangered. We have also committed to refrain in our foreign relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes and principles of the United Nations. The International Court of Justice has also previously affirmed that international law prohibits the use of force and intervention in another state's affairs. Due to the shortcomings of its predecessor, the League of Nations, the UN was created to prevent countries from resorting to conflict, to settle disputes and prohibit the use of force unless it is done in a legally prescribed manner. In doing so, the UN has played a pivotal role in ensuring peaceful existence amongst nations, including in ending the colonial subjugation by powerful countries over others, underpinned by respect for the equal rights of nations, large and small, and respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples. Joining the organization and committing to its principles afforded protection to many of us, with the supposed assurance that no longer would one nation be seen as inferior to another. Unfortunately, when countries ignore the Charter and act contrary to its central premise, it undermines the credibility of the entire system in which we all undertake our international relations. The stability of the international system depends not only on the respect, but on the consistent application of these established legal norms. We all benefit from a rules-based international order.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Come in, come in.
Law. When we break those norms, we invite anarchy and an environment where might makes right, ignoring the complexity of interrelations and interdependence in our modern world. Mr. President, the unilateral military strikes carried out by the United States of America against Venezuela and the abduction of President Nicolás Maduro and his spouse from Venezuelan territory for transfer to the United States wantonly violates the sovereignty and territorial integrity and independence of Venezuela.
What?
These actions are also in stark contrast to our established legal norms, reinforcing the belief that might is right and undermining diplomacy. History has repeatedly demonstrated that military invasions against sovereign states yield only instability and deepen crises. Unlawful unilateral force of this nature undermines the stability of the international order and the principle of equality among nations. Such use of force also undermines the institutional infrastructure established to regulate relations among nations. We have seen examples of these in Libya, Iraq, and countless cases in Africa where foreign interventions and interference create security crises and undermine national governance institutions cultivated through nuanced and complex national contexts. South Africa stresses that allegations of internal governance challenges, human rights concerns, or acts of criminality by a head of state cannot justify a breach of the Charter's prohibition on the use of force, particularly Article 2.4 of the Charter. The peaceful resolution of disputes and internal matters must proceed in accordance with international law and through multilateral mechanisms. Additionally, under international law, a state has exclusive jurisdiction over persons and conduct within its own territory. Any enforcement of domestic law, including arrest by one state within the territory of another state without the state's consent, is an unlawful violation of sovereignty. There are recourse mechanisms at the disposal of states to implement international law.
This is the UN representative from South Africa.
A case before the International Court of Justice or seeking action from the Security Council. We note the statement issued by a group of concerned countries, mainly those in the Latin American region.
We're hearing some United Nations tears today because they didn't get to do anything.
Most affected by the developments in Venezuela, which reiterates that the situation in Venezuela must be resolved exclusively through peaceful means, through dialogue, negotiation, and respect for the will of the Venezuelan people in all its expressions, without external interference and in accordance with international law. Mr. President, each one of our countries, including our peoples, that are members of this organization and that are bound to its charters, have the right to determine our own democratic and political path. This inherent charter-given right...
They made the representative of Somalia the president of the Security Council for this month in the UN. That really shows you where it's at.
...to self-determination cannot, and should not be
Outta
abrogated.
here.
If we do not stand up for the sovereign rights of any nations or states when they are undermined and wantonly violated, then which one of us are safe or are guaranteed protection by the principles of the Charter and international law? Failure to act decisively against such violations is a tantamount.
Hit the like button, guys. Let's get this to 400 likes. I really do appreciate y'all being here with me today.
Inviting anarchy
with this breaking
and normalizing
news.
The use of force and military might.
This is
as
an
the main form of
emergency
discourse
meeting of the
in
UN
international
Security
politics.
Council.
This would be a regression into a world preceding the United Nations, a world that gave us two brutal world wars, and an international system prone to severe structural instability and lawlessness. We cannot afford to proceed into a complex future without the stability and protection afforded by international law. I thank you.
I thank the representative of South Africa for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Eritrea.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me at the onset to congratulate Your
the
Excellency
UN just
and the
likes to
government
mother
of the Federal
F
Republic of
everybody
Somalia
with this,
on
giving them
assuming
the
presidency of the
come on.
Security Council for the month of January. We also
Everybody congratulating Somalia for getting the president's chair in January. Get out of here.
extend our congratulations to Bahrain,
Get outta
Colombia,
here.
the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, and Latvia on their election to the Security Council. As this is the
Eritrea. Where's that?
first Security Council meeting of the year, allow me to pay tribute to the outgoing members, Algeria, Guyana, the Republic of Korea, Sierra Leone, and Slovenia, for their dedicated service and diligent work throughout their tenure of the Council. I read this statement on behalf of the Group of Friends in Defense of the United Nations Charter. The Group of Friends in Defense of the Charter of the United Nations condemns the most unequivocal and categoric manner the act of aggression perpetrated on 3rd January 2026 against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela by special forces of the United States of America, which included armed attacks against civilian and military objects in the capital city of Caracas,
Delta Force, lady.
as well as in various other cities of the Venezuelan territory, and the illegal abduction of the President and First Lady of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, His Excellency Mr. Nicolás Maduro Moros,
His
and Her
Excellency.
Excellency Mrs. Celia
Oh,
Flores
lady.
de Maduro. The member states of the Group of Friends in Defense of the Charter of the United Nations expressed their serious concern at the impact of these series of armed attacks, particularly on civilians and their human rights to life, which have included military assaults with U.S. Special Forces, while emphasizing that such acts constitute a clear breach of international law and of each and every principle governing international relations, including...
This lady is going to leave this meeting and she's going to go have a $2,000 lunch, all right, at some, posh Manhattan restaurant. Just keep that in mind.
those foreseen in the Charter of the United Nations. The Group of Friends of the Charter of the United Nations reiterates its firm support to the constitutional government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela under the leadership of President Nicolás Maduro.
Put a one in the chat if the UN irritates you.
The importance of ensuring strict respect for the inviolability of the immunities accorded to heads of states and governments.
Put a 2 in the chat if you agree with them.
International law, while renewing its unwavering solidarity with the Venezuelan people in their ongoing
Thank you so much for subscribing.
defending their homeland, including through the actions it may take within the framework of international law to exercise its inalienable right to self-defense. The member states of the Group of Friends in Defense of the Charter of the United Nations demand for the immediate cessation of all hostilities against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, for the full respect for the sovereignty, territorial integrity, political independence, and inalienable right to self-determination of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, for the immediate return.
I mean, as we can see with the breaking news out of Minnesota, with the Somalian community there, they have made Somalia the lead chair on the UN Security Council.
Maduro and First Lady Celia Flores de Maduro to the Venezuelan national territory and for
We
those
welcome all
responsible
opinions. I
for
just
these
have
acts
mine.
of aggression to be held
This is
accountable.
news with a twist.
The group of friends of the Charter of the United Nations firmly reject the remarks delivered by the President of the United States of America during the afternoon of 3rd January 2026, in which he not only threatened with additional airstrikes against Venezuelan territory, but also claimed to resolve to occupy and govern the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and to exploit the natural resources and administer the wealth of that sisterly nation in what can only be described as the confession of a clear plan of annexation that foresees, among others, the complete obliteration of the inalienable rights of the Venezuelan people, as well as the fundamental rights of the Venezuelan state as a whole. The member states of the Group of Friends of the Defense of the Charter of the United Nations call on all relevant international bodies, including the Security Council and the General Assembly of the United Nations, to swiftly mobilize in order to uphold the purposes and principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations.
Violation of customary international law,
great.
including the principles of the inviolability of the immunities accorded to the heads of a state and government under international law, and represent a grave assault on the sovereign equality of states. The Islamic Republic of Iran recalls Venezuela's inherent right to self-defense and underscore the legal responsibility of the United Nations in particular.
I just can't do it. Let's get a little palate cleanser here. Let's go over to Pete Hegseth addressing some of the U.S. military.
Thank you, Evan. Appreciate it. And what an honor it is to be.
I guess they didn't get the. Well, we're going to have to go back to this guy then. Jeez.
The Security Council to take immediate measures to halt this unlawful aggression and to ensure accountability for all those responsible. Iran also affirms its full support for the people and legitimate the elected government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Third, the United States is openly seeking to substitute its domestic law for international law and the Charter of the United Nations. This represents a serious warning to the international community and to all member states. Such unlawful conduct strikes at the very foundations of the Charter-based international legal order and establishes a dangerous precedent that must be categorically and unequivocally rejected. The so-called declared U.S. policy of peace through strength prescribe the law of the jungle and the rule of force instead of rule of law, and if tolerated and normalized, would render the collective security system established by the Charter ineffective and devoid of purpose. Fourth, the continued inaction and paralysis of the Security Council in the face of the explicit threat and act of aggression by the United States have fostered a dangerous climate of impunity. It has emboldened the United States to persist in unlawful conduct that poses a grave threat to regional and international peace.
By the way, I just want to show you, thank you very much, everybody. If you search Maduro leaves court on YouTube, just right there, see that? We are second. We are second on that main page in that search. So thank you very much. I do appreciate it.
And security.
Make it a come up.
In recent days, the President of the United States had repeatedly issued public threat of the use of force against the Islamic Republic of Iran in manifest violation of Article 2 of the Charter of the United Nations. At the same time, the United States is shedding crocodile tears for the Iranian people and hypocritically claims to support them while maintaining a well-documented record of intervention, the use of force, and the imposition of unlawful unilateral coercive measures against Iran. This includes its direct political, military, and operational support and involvement for Israeli regime unlawful joint war of aggression against Iran between 13 and 24 June 2025, which resulted in loss of civilian life, attacks on civilian infrastructure, and serious violations of fundamental human rights of the Iranian people. Iran reaffirms its inherent right to defend its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and national security, and to protect its
national security. Are there not thousands of people protesting in the streets and protesters being shot in Iran right now? Isn't that what's happening?
Against any foreign
Accountability.
interference. The United
How about
States
you, sir?
of America will bear full responsibility for consequences arising from its unlawful threats and any ensuing
I know they all want a
escalation.
piece of it, Lexi Law Nerd.
Finally, we unequivocally reject the baseless allegation.
Lexi Law Nerd says they all want Venezuela for the oil, gold, etc. Then they should have acted. Now they whine like the weak individuals they are.
Unwarranted reference made to Iran by the representative of the United States at this meeting. The facts on the ground are clear, speak loudly for themselves, and cannot be concealed by political rhetoric or manufactured narrative. I thank you.
Wow.
I thank the representative of Islamic Republic of Iran, and now give the floor to the representative of Uganda.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf
Uganda,
of
Uganda,
representing 121 member states,
wow,
united by the shared principle of respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all nations. The Coordinating Bureau of the Non-Aligned Movement, NAM, categorically condemns the act of aggression perpetuated by the United States of America against the Bolivian Republic of Venezuela since the early hours of 3rd January 2026, which included armed attacks against civilian and military locations in the capital city of Caracas, as well as in various other cities of the Venezuelan territory. The Coordinating Bureau of the Non-Aligned Movement notes that attacks in question, which blatantly violate the purposes and the principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations, as well as the norms of the international law, constitute an act of war against the Bolivian Republic of Venezuela that undermines both regional and international.
By the way, this
peace,
lady was
security,
fired from the DMV last week, and now she got this job.
And stability, while also threatening the very right to life of the Venezuelan people. Excuse me. The Coordinating Bureau of the Non-Aligned Movement demands the immediate cessation of all hostilities against the Bolivian Republic of Venezuela.
This is breaking news with a twist, ladies and gentlemen.
Territorial integrity, political independence, and inalienable rights to the self-determination of Bolivian Republic of Venezuela,
right away.
And that those responsible for those ongoing acts of aggression to be held
I'm not
accountable.
going to Iran.
The Coordinating Bureau of the Non-Aligned Movement reaffirms the inviolability of the immunities accorded to the heads of states and government under international law, which constitute a fundamental pillar of sovereign equality, peace, coexistence, and
would you like to supersize it?
Relations. These immunities, firmly rooted in customary international law and consistent with the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, must be respected universally without discrimination, and any actions or measures that undermine or selectively disregard them risk eroding multilateralism, destabilizing international relations, and weakening the international legal order. Excuse me. Mr. President, the Coordinating Bureau of the Non-Aligned Movement reiterates its full solidarity with the people and government of the Bolivian Republic of Venezuela at this critical time, and insists that military solutions are not viable avenues for addressing any issues that may be of concern between members of the international community. I thank you, Mr. President.
Wow. Nails down a chalkboard.
Thank the representative of Uganda for the statement.
This gentleman has several daycares in Minnesota, allegedly.
I now give the floor to the representative of Cuba, who has asked for the floor to make a further statement.
Not even ready, Cuba? Come on, Cuba.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, my
Cuba, don't make them a
delegation feels I must
fongo.
take the floor again to respond to the unfounded accusations formulated by the United States against Cuba. We are indignant that those that have led unilateral aggressions and systematic violations of international law pretend to judge other sovereign states with a totally immoral and irresponsible attitude lacking respect. We fundamentally reject the accusations that Cuba has intelligence assets in Venezuela. These kinds of statements lack any factual basis.
Cuba has intelligence assets in Venezuela. He just said it.
And are a clear attempt to take the eyes of the world off the criminal acts of the United States in the region. Cuba strictly respects the sovereignty, independence, and inalienable right to decide their own destiny, as established by the United Nations Charter. Cooperation between both countries is in multiple spheres, has a legitimate basis, and is based on bilateral agreements signed by both parties. As has been declared by the revolutionary government, the Trent 32 combatants that fell in terrorist acts perpetrated by the United States were in missions of the revolutionary forces at the request of Venezuela. Those patriots were heroic in their action, showing solidarity with millions of Cubans. These accusations attempt to suggest that Cuba is involved in this way in Venezuela. We categorically reject that. Thank you.
Okay. Categorically.
I thank the representative of Cuba for the statement.
Would you like to sign up for our daycare program?
Names inscribed on the list of speakers.
We will pay you.
Adjourned.
Well, it is adjourned over there. Wow. Wow and wow. We're going to head over to a different view here. Canto make them a fongo. The emergency UN Security Council meeting adjourning. They're all going to go to have their $1,000 lunches as they complain about the United States. And they complain about the United States violating international law. Come on. And we're going to jump back to this shot here, more from London.
Both friend and foe globally. Foreign Secretary.
Well, Manfred is right to say, and
Foreign Secretary responding to some of the parliament comments.
Said in a speech just before Christmas that the global rules-based order is under pressure from different directions. However, we believe it remains important. It is particularly important, and it is in our interests and the nature
I don't know where the motorcade is. They must have put him in an Uber.
For our country and history, it is in our interest, but it is also a fundamental part of our values. And we believe that the international law and the rules-based order are fundamentally a foundation for peace and security across the world. We do have to engage with the world as we find it, not as we would like it to be. That does mean continuing to advocate for international law, both with people right across the world, including directly with our allies, but it also means increasing our investment in defence, because fundamentally protecting our national security has to be the most important priority for the government.
Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Surely the real story coming out today and over the last few days is the revelation that we should all have known that this country has opted out of protecting in the international rules-based system. We have not significantly invested in defence, and even the commitment that the Foreign Secretary speaks of does not keep pace with defence inflation. So doesn't this really reveal a simple truth? That, as the Prime Minister revealed on Sunday, he hasn't even spoken to the American president. The Americans did it without us because the Americans don't give a damn what this House thinks.
Foreign Secretary.
I guess I would just have to ask, who was it who didn't significantly invest in defence over the last 14 years? It's this government which is substantially increasing investment in defence and also chairing the coalition of the willing and also showing leadership on the international stage as well. And what has struck me, becoming Foreign Secretary and having discussions with governments all across the world over the last few months, is how much those governments are saying how welcome it is that Britain is back.
Nick Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Maduro was an illegitimate president. From Caracas in the New York Times today, Colette Capriles describes a struggle for survival, a primitive capitalism, a web of bosses, private loyalties, corrupt practices, and institutional ruins that replaced public life in Venezuela. So can I ask the Foreign Secretary, what can the UK do to support the development of strong civic institutions there that can help build a new Venezuela?
Foreign Secretary.
My honourable friend is exactly right, because, look, there is a risk, a real risk of instability in Venezuela now, and building civil society, giving people in Venezuela the hope rather than the fear now, ensuring there is stability, but also building up capacity, working with opposition parties and with other organisations is now going to be crucial. That is something we are strongly advocating for. It is something that I have discussed with the US Secretary of State and said that we will continue to make a priority based on the work that our excellent Charge d'Affaires has been doing over many years, but now we need to do it extensively, including in discussion with opposition parties.
Let it cook.
Pete Wishart.
Let it cook.
It's hard to find an occasion when a British Prime Minister has looked so irrelevant and spineless on an era-defining...
Was that a dog laying on the floor there in the Parliament?
...international issue as this one does on this occasion. We are witnessing an existential threat to the international rules-based order, and the Prime Minister can't even rouse himself to give it even the meekest of defences. France, Spain, Brazil, Mexico and the UN Secretary-General have all been clear that the Trump administration has violated international law. When will the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary find their voices and join that chorus of condemnation?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, what I would say is the Prime Minister's response.
Look at that. There's a dog there laying down. Just laying down, chilling on the floor. You guys see that?
Response has been very much in line with the leaders of countries, not just across Europe, but across the world as well. And we continue to stand up for and highlight the importance of international law, but also to focus on the realities in Venezuela, where there has been huge damage done over a long time, including with the interference by Iran and by Russia in Venezuela as well, and to focus on what should be all of our priorities now, which is getting a democratic transition for Venezuela.
Lizzie Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We speak today from the heart of our democracy, where power transfers peacefully according to the will of the people. So I thank the Foreign Secretary for her statement. And does she agree with me that democracy is the right of all people, no matter where they live? And does she further agree with me that it's for Venezuelans to decide what their future holds?
Hear, hear.
Foreign Secretary.
Hear, hear.
I completely agree with my honourable friend, and the people of Venezuela have been denied that democratic right for far too long. Election results have not been respected, and they have faced some of the most horrendous political repression, including on an industrial scale. The July 2024 elections were clearly not respected, and the official results were never published. That is why we continue to work with to talk to the opposition parties and also to talk to others in Venezuela about the importance of getting that democratic transition in place.
Sir Andrew Mitchell.
Of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, quite a lot depends on what now happens. But Mr. Maduro stole the elections in Venezuela.
This is the British Parliament reaction to what is happening in Venezuela. We saw the UN Emergency Security Council meeting and some live coverage of the court proceedings in Manhattan with Maduro, who pled not guilty along with his wife, who he also had to ride in the car with. That's the real news right there. What was the conversation? And again, what do you guys think that Nicolás Maduro's wife was saying to him in the car ride?
Destroyed the lives of tens of thousands of American citizens and more widely, and made huge amounts of money out of it. Isn't the world a better place
we welcome everyone's
with him before the
here.
courts in New York? And in this case, do not the ends justify the means?
Foreign Secretary.
So I think that Venezuela is in a stronger position without Maduro leading them, especially given the horrendous human rights abuses, the huge damage to their economy as well. But he said at the beginning the implication from what he said was that this is important about what happens next. And what happens next really does matter. And that is where the UK is determined to do everything we can to make sure that that is a transition to a democracy and to stability as well. Because I don't think Venezuela will have stability without a proper democratic transition.
John McDonnell.
The Secretary of State has said that the role of the government has been
to a lot of exercise there.
Uphold international law. Part of upholding international law is to call out crimes when they're witnessed. And what we've seen here, the Article 2.4 of the United Nations Charter is very explicit about the illegality of entering into a foreign state with armed force. And that's why I have to say I found it shameful that the Prime Minister and ministers today in the news rounds have refused to condemn this action. Because in not condemning the action, I think Trump will interpret that as the green light to go in wherever to steal the national assets of those countries. And as a result of that, we're all in a more dangerous place.
Well, what I would say to Madam President is the importance of promoting international law in the most effective way also means promoting the rules-based order and the rules-based alliances that we have. It means being able to raise issues around international law both publicly and privately in a way that has the greatest results to defend the rules-based order. That is what we will continue to do, and that, frankly, is what is in the UK's interest.
Oh, yeah, she got a phone call.
Venezuelans are relieved to be free of Maduro tyranny. However, Venezuela risks remaining a failed state rather than a free state unless the international community comes together. Oil companies are not state builders, nor are they capable of democratic capacity building.
I don't care if you're on the left or on the right. You're welcome here.
I'm surprised there's no mention in the Foreign Secretary's statement of plans to evacuate British nationals if possible, nor how many British nationals are in country. I also asked what phone calls the Foreign Secretary has had since this action with the leader of Commonwealth country and nation Guyana,
and in
to
UK's
whom we have
best
an important
interest, as she
relationship.
said.
And if she hasn't spoken to that leader, why? Foreign Secretary.
So, as I set out, I think, in my statement, there are estimated 500 British nationals in Venezuela. We did look at all necessary possible crisis responses over the weekend. We stood up the crisis facility in the Foreign Office to ensure that we were ready to respond if necessary at any point. It did not go beyond the response that we did put out around changing travel advice. And over the weekend, British nationals were advised to shelter in place while it was assessed what might be happening next. We have had some consular contact, but it has been very limited, and we have obviously been available to any British nationals who want our support, as we would continue to be. We are also in contact with Commonwealth countries and also with overseas territories. In particular, my honourable friend is following up with overseas territories who are particularly affected by instability in the region.
Rachel Blake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful for the Foreign Secretary's remarks, and she's talked about instability in the region and the need for grassroots investment in order for there to be a peaceful transition. Can she share with us the assessment that she's made about the impact of economic instability in the region and the role of businesses in the region, and how that instability could feed into and damage the possibility of a peaceful transition?
Secretary.
My friend is exactly right, because the nature of the economic crisis in Venezuela over the last decade has pushed huge numbers of Venezuelans into extreme hardship. It is one of the reasons why so many Venezuelans have left the country. An estimated 1 in 4 Venezuelans have left the country over the last 10 years as a result.
That
and
is
this should be a country with a strong
is all the people that have left Venezuela.
Economy. It is very important to build that up, but crucially that has to be to the benefit of the people of Venezuela, not to the benefit of criminals.
International crowd, they didn't come to your house.
Or corrupt regimes.
Richard Ford.
Deputy Speaker, this is about being principled. What if we were to learn from the White House that Greenland had been the source of cocaine or fentanyl flowing to the United States? Even if we don't expect a fabricated pretext on
You just say Greenland has a lot of blow.
Greenland or imminent US intervention there, will the government please condemn the unilateral action in Venezuela by the Trump administration before we see a complete breakdown of the rules-based order?
Well, I think you will have heard in my statement me setting out very strongly our position on Greenland, on Denmark, and we will continue to do so because we are very clear. This is about the NATO alliance, this is about the rules-based order, and this is about our close ally.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Foreign Secretary's statement that she will abide by international law, and I would not expect her to publish the legal advice she's received from the law officers and others, but I would expect her to set out the government's own analysis of whether and how the acts of US forces towards Venezuela comply with the rule of law. So will she now do that?
Yeah.
Well, you'll know, my friend will obviously know the constraints in the ministerial code in terms of discussing legal advice. We, as I said, have set out that it is obviously for the US to set out publicly their legal basis for the actions that they have taken. We have raised the issue of international law. I have directly raised that with the US Secretary of State, set out our views and our concerns and the importance of urging all partners to abide by international law.
Simon Hall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The essay question is not whether Mr. Maduro was a good man. That is a clear no-brainer. The essay question here,
whether Mr. Maduro was a good man,
is whether the actions of the US president were legal, and America cannot be expected to mark her own homework. So 2 questions to the Foreign Secretary, if I may. The first is, what body or bodies would she identify as being the responsible body to adjudicate on the legality of the American action? And secondly, the Vice President of Venezuela has this afternoon been sworn in as the new president. Her hands are as tainted with the previous regime as Maduro. What read across should this House have from that incident?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, the UN Security Council has been discussing the issue about Venezuela today, and I'm sure those international discussions will continue. On the issue of the Vice President being sworn in, we continue not to recognise the legitimacy of the Venezuelan regime. We do want to see stability and a transition to democracy, and we are urging the Vice President to take now the steps for that transition and to a democracy that respects the will and the human rights of the Venezuelan people.
Karen Moon.
Whereas, Madam Deputy Speaker, I accept that Venezuela is a brutal and failed and highly dangerous state. But across Eastern Europe, the implications of this action will be deeply destabilising. Can I ask the Foreign Secretary, in her discussions with the US Secretary of State, when she mentioned international law with him, did she reference the message that this action sends to Putin and Russia's ambitions in Europe?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, what my honourable friend will know is that we continually discuss the threat from Russia and the importance of the transatlantic alliance supporting Ukraine with the US, and I have discussed that many times with the US Secretary of State. The Prime Minister has discussed that continually with the US President, and we are clear about the importance of defending Ukraine. The Prime Minister will tomorrow be part of the Coalition of the Willing, which is exactly about supporting Ukraine, and we have to ensure that as we build those international alliances, we do so in the most effective way to support Ukraine. I can also assure him that I raise the issue of international law and the concerns that we have with the US Secretary of State.
Gavin Robinson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think it's clear that the Foreign Secretary supports the end, if not the means. And I think it is clear that she accepts the outcome, though she can't bring herself nor the government to condone the actions of President Trump. But today we learned that the Chinese have warned against both touching the oil resources of Venezuela and also demanded the return of President Maduro. Does she see that as saber rattling, or is she concerned?
They're not bringing them back.
Well, what I would say is that I know that there have been many...
They're not bringing him back. Let's just make that clear. He's not going back to Venezuela. They're not just going to go, okay, it's fine. Let's just send John back. Everything's cool. It's not happening.
Concerns about the engagement, particularly as well of Iran and Russia in the oil industry in Venezuela. He referred to issues around China and the position of the Chinese government. What I would just say is I think the oil industry in Venezuela should be benefiting the people of Venezuela, not other countries, not corrupt regimes, but actually the people of Venezuela.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Fired.
The truth is the warning signs that the rules-based order is at risk have been there for some time. In her evidence to the Congress during the impeachment inquiry into President Trump, the former White House advisor on Russia and Europe, Fiona Hill, claimed that an informal offer was made by Russia to withdraw their support for Venezuela in exchange for America withdrawing its support for the Ukraine. In the light of these events, will the Foreign Secretary confirm in her conversations with our American counterparts that this specific allegation has been raised and what response she has?
Yes,
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I think we continue to have very important discussions with the US about Ukraine and about support for Ukraine, and many of those discussions have been about the security guarantees that the US would provide as part of a peace agreement for Ukraine.
Hit that like button, guys. Let's get this video to 500 likes. I appreciate you being here. We just eclipsed 200,000 views on this live stream. Thank you so much.
Guarantees involve the US providing that support, working with other European countries. That will continue to be a central objective of our foreign policy now.
Sir Bernard Jenkin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. To those who still harbour illusions about an idealised world of international rules which will be abided by all, shouldn't we just say, well, welcome to the real world?
There you go.
Where might very often proves to be right.
There you go.
And we have to face the circumstances that we are in. Can I therefore give my support to the government's ambivalence, as supported by my right honourable friend, who I think also rightly criticised the slow pace of rearmament, and that's all she disagreed with the government about. But can she now avoid blowing the bridges that we have with the United States and use that influence? And doesn't she agree it really would be stupid to slag off President Trump now when we want to have influence over what he does next?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, let me just sort of address some of the bigger points that he's raising about the international rules-based order and the sort of global power politics. We obviously, and he and I are old enough to have the experience and reflections on the Cold War, which was all about the great power politics and the difficulties, also at a time when, post the Second World War, we had worked hard to develop a rules-based order alongside those big military military global tensions. So this has been a part of global history for a long time. The tensions between how you maintain an international law and an international rules-based order, and also how you engage with the different competing interests, sometimes from some of the biggest countries in the world, sometimes from some of the smaller countries in the world who have particular power in particular areas.
Right, everyone, you are watching live now from Fox. We were listening there to British Parliament, still going on right now, talking about what happened over the weekend and really the point of view from England, as we have several people continuing to talk there on the floor. But I want to go out live right now, Secretary.
Oh, here we go. This is what I wanted to see
right
earlier.
Now, at this event where it's called the Arsenal of Freedom. Let's
The
listen
Arsenal
in right now
of Freedom with
Fox.
Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War. Oh, they kicked that music down real quick. Yeah. We're not going to listen to that music.
House band and everything. Thank you. It is great to see this beautiful group and to be here in Newport News. And I want to thank all of you for what you do. That's why we're here.
Newport
That's
News,
why we're
Virginia.
launching the Arsenal
Has anybody ever been to Newport News, Virginia?
Freedom Tour. It's about all of you. Some of you are wearing a uniform. Some of you are not. All of you are wearing hard hats, and all of you are contributing to the warfighter. The kind of urgency that we need is you understand the speed and the specificity of the beautiful machines that you create require an expertise and an investment that this administration is prepared to make and make fast. It's always inspiring to stand amongst patriots who quite literally are building our nation's firepower. I had a chance this morning to swear in some new recruits. We have a historic recruiting surge at the Department of War. Record amounts of Americans want to join our uniform class. Last year was a record of multiple decades. This year, we're already ahead of last year. Americans are fired up to serve. I also had a chance to go to our next aircraft carrier, the JFK. I don't know if you heard, but our aircraft carriers have been busy recently. That one will be busy for decades to come, ensuring America is free and safe and powerful. And now here we are at Newport News Shipyard at the USS Oklahoma. And I'm here on behalf of the president, who has, from his first day in office, operated on a few core principles at the baseline: pure, unadulterated common sense. First, that a leader's primary duty is to put America and Americans first. Second, that the surest and only real path to peace is through strength. We're in the strength business. You are in the strength business. And third, that a nation that cannot build things, a nation that can't create its own tools or its own defenses or its own future, is a nation that is in managed decline. President Donald J. Trump looked at that managed decline, a decline that had been accepted by elites in both parties, and he rejected it. And we fundamentally reject it. And in doing so, he has unleashed a great American revival, a reawakening of our industrial spirit and our national confidence, a new golden age for America that you are all a part of building. As his Secretary of War, my mission is to execute President Trump's vision within our armed forces and ignite that revival. The mission has three core components, three pillars upon which we are building our national security. It's actually quite simple. First, we're reviving the warrior ethos inside our fighting force, reminding our warriors and our uniformed military that their sole purpose is to be the most lethal fighting force on the planet. So no more DEI, no more.
Oh, come on.
It's just standards, accountability, readiness, training, discipline, and lethality. Back to basics across the department, which is what our warriors really want. Second, we must and we are rebuilding our military with the best equipment, training, and leadership to ensure our warfighters are never in a fair fight. And you've seen historic investments, over $1 trillion in the last budget. You'll see even more, and it isn't just in platforms, it is in people. And third, we're reestablishing deterrence that's so absolute and so unquestioned that our enemies will not dare to test us. You see, under the previous administration, whether it was the debacle of the withdrawal in Afghanistan that cost American lives and smeared our reputation, whether it was the war unleashed in Israel after October 7th by Hamas, or the war in Ukraine that never would have started under President Trump, the world started wondering whether America really was strong and whether America really could lead. Well, that's over now. Just ask the Houthis and our ships that now sail freely. Imagine that. Under the previous administration, when our ships got shot at, we just said, I guess we have to deal with it. All the way back to Thomas Jefferson, we said, you're not shooting at our ships, and if you do, you may not see tomorrow. Well, we did that with the Houthis, and our ships now sail freely all around the world without being attacked and without being shot at. That's peace through strength. Same with Midnight Hammer, where our B-2s flew 37 hours down and back and were never seen by the Iranians and dropped 14 precision munitions exactly where they were supposed to drop, obliterating Iran's nuclear capabilities, not to mention the Tomahawks that came off of a beautiful submarine and delivered that decisive blow as well on one of the nuclear facilities. Deterrence is back. Not to mention drug boats in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific carrying drugs headed to the United States to poison the American people. We're not playing the whole catch and release game anymore. These are foreign terrorist organizations, the Al-Qaeda of our hemisphere, and we will sink every drug boat headed in our direction.
Hear, hear.
Reestablishing deterrence. Our southern border, which allowed an invasion of people we didn't know who they were under the previous administration, 7 months of zero crossings at our border. A country that isn't sovereign is not a country. Reestablishing deterrence. And then we saw 3 nights ago in downtown Caracas in Venezuela, as nearly 200 of our greatest Americans went downtown in Caracas. Seems those Russian air defenses didn't quite work so well, did they?
Ooh.
Downtown Caracas, and grabbed an indicted individual wanted by American justice in support of law enforcement without a single American killed. Reestablishing deterrence.
There you go.
Because of President Trump's leadership, the world is taking notice. They're noticing American power, they're noticing American strength, they're noticing American clarity and leadership, and you are at the core of ensuring that happens. Everything we're doing is aimed at those goals. And that's why just before Christmas at Mar-a-Lago, I had the privilege of joining President Trump and the Secretary of the Navy for a historic announcement, the creation of the Golden Fleet. The Golden Fleet is the Navy's investment to revitalize America's maritime industrial base and rapidly build and sustain the fleet and fundamentally change how we do business and maintain military supremacy. This new battle fleet, anchored by a new generation of Trump-class battleships, is a declaration to the world that our command of the seas is and will remain non-negotiable. That announcement, along with the incredible vital work being done right here, is a generational commitment to American sea power. This investment in both the visible might of battleships and the stealthy lethality of the submarines built in this very yard is a direct investment in peace through strength. It's an investment in the future fight, ensuring that America has the tools to win any conflict, anywhere, any time. And as I mentioned, as was mentioned, today marks the first stop on a month-long Arsenal of Freedom tour from the War Department. And on this tour, we'll be traveling from the shipyards of the coast to the factories of the heartland to see the work being done by the military and our partners in American manufacturing to usher in a new golden age of peace through strength, a revival of our industrial base, all American made by the best Americans. We know that our treasured freedoms are only as secure as our arsenal is strong, and nothing is more important than securing that freedom. So I'm here to thank you, the men and women assembled here today and those you represent, who are designing and constructing our weapons of war that my children and yours, my grandchildren and yours, will rely upon to ensure the peace, stability, and security of the United States. You are standing shoulder to shoulder with the warfighters of the War Department.
Hit that like button, guys. Let's get this video to 500 likes.
I mean, for a moment to speak plainly about the threats to that freedom. We find ourselves in a world of growing threats, a world the comfortable elites in Washington refuse to acknowledge for far too long. For decades, a bipartisan consensus sold this country a dangerous fantasy. They told us that history was over, that the rise of peer competitors was a relic of the past, and that we could afford to trade out our industrial might, our factories, our jobs.
All right, everyone, we did lose that shot there for you. Secretary Hegseth speaking, talking about American strength, also talking about peace through strength, and then making some remarks about the operations that happened over the weekend in Venezuela. We will take a 2-minute break. Stay right here with us. Always more to come in just moments on Live Now.
And just like there is more to come with this international news, we covered it all over the world today for you guys. I want to thank everybody for joining me here on the Zero Dark Tony channel. We went from the pineapple to the Big Apple, from Maine to Spain for sure. I want to thank you all for joining me. Thank you, mods, for hanging. Everybody who watched all the way till the end. We will be covering this story from tip to tail. We do have the Nick Reiner hearing coming up, so make sure you hit your notification bells for that one. Once again, thank you all for coming out and joining me on this historic day. I appreciate you so much for being here. Like, subscribe, and share. Make sure you leave a comment. Leave a comment below. I don't want to forget that this time. Thank you so much again for joining me, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you.